it off. So I guess to start off, do you want to introduce who you are to the 4 people that watch my videos?
Hi, I'm Doc, and I'm a superpowered robot baby bitch. That's hello.
Nice to meet you. I guess that's kind of all there is to know about you.
Yeah.
That's kind of everything. But you were actually the first guest on my channel as well.
I guess I should be a little serious, a tiny bit.
Well, you should be really grateful. So do you want to tell people as well how we first met, / how we know each other, and when we came up with the idea for this video?
Sure.
Yes.
When I first met Emily, I feel like I'm giving a speech at your wedding.
Yeah.
When I first met Emily, she was crouched under a fake net of leaves that she was using as a prop for a film.
Yeah.
She was covered in glue. I'm convinced she was eating it. But yeah, so we met at film school there, 1 year her senior. And I actually don't know the specific time.
Okay, see, I remember the exact moment. So it was winter of December 2023. I remember we went to the BFI and we saw a screening of My Night with Maud. I was really late and I remember walking in late and it was embarrassing and it was very busy. And then we were walking home and we were walking along South Bank and we were just generally talking about Éric Rohmer, who, if you haven't guessed, this is what this video is about. And we were talking about it and I was like, oh my God, we should do a video where we watch everything that he's ever made. So yeah, I guess we haven't introduced this, but that's what this video is. We are going to be talking about Éric Rohmer, a man that we both love wholeheartedly, and we're going to talk about his films and talk about everything that he's done. I have prepared many extensive questions, as you know, about this whole thing, but I'm going to introduce the kind of setting / structure of this video now, because there's a lot to it. So we've watched like the top 30-ish of his films, roughly, and what we're going to do is we're going to rank his entire filmography, and we also have dun, da, da, da,
We've got the board.
this, which I made this morning in the library.
Which library?
Yeah, so we have all the movies that we've watched kind of between us. So at the end of the video, after we've discussed every single one of these films and all the different categories, then we will rank all of these like in order on the board and have a definitive like Éric Rohmer ranking. So that's kind of...
So these are all the movies that we're gonna
These are all
talk
the movies,
about.
yeah. Éric Rohmer has been known for making, I guess, categories of films. So he has his moral tales, he has the Comedies and Proverbs, and he has the Tale of Four Seasons, and then he kind of has this like other category of like random shit.
Yeah.
Like the spy movie that he did, and
Incredible.
Rendezvous in Paris, which we watched together a few weeks ago.
To an extent.
To an extent. It was on the day that I got fired. So it's safe to say that I was not in a very good state
shaken.
of mind.
Yeah.
A little shaken, not stirred. So general background on Éric Rohmer. His name actually isn't Éric Rohmer.
I knew that. I think you told me, but I don't know what his actual name.
I don't have his real name, but I do know that he fashioned his name Éric Rohmer from the names of 2 famous artists. So one of them, Erich von Stroheim, and the writer Sax Rohmer. He co-founded the film magazine La Gazette du Cinéma with Jacques Rivette and Jean-Luc Godard.
He co-founded?
Yes, co-founded in 1950. But then in 1951, he joined the staff of the famous Cahiers du Cinéma, the famous Bazaar magazine, and he became the editor of that magazine in 1956. So for most of his professional life, he was a journalist, kind of film critic, friends with all these famous new wave directors, but he wasn't actually making any movies himself. He said he actually had no interest in it, and he never really saw himself as being a filmmaker, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
But then he made the moral tales first. So he made a couple of shorter films before then. I think La Signe de Lion was his first feature film. But he made a couple of shorts before then, like Charlotte and the Presentation of Her Steak, I think it's called, which sounds really weird.
I'd watch it. I would.
So he made those first, and then he made the moral tales, which were filmed over the span of 10 years. Then in the 80s, he embarked on his second series of films, the Comedies and Proverbs, and then he followed these with a third series in the 90s, The Tales of Four Seasons. Some general facts about Mr. Éric Rohmer. So he was apparently very secretive about his private life, and he gave like different birth dates to all the reporters that he spoke to, which is really funny because it's like, out of all things to be secretive about, your birthday feels really inconsequential. Yeah. Unless he was like, I'm so embarrassed, I'm a Gemini. He also was a devout Catholic, a monarchist, and an ecological zealot, which means that for years he had no telephone. He refused to get into cars because he called them immoral polluters. And he was known to jog 2 miles to his office every single morning because of that. He was extremely secretive and he often wore disguises such as false mustaches, even at the premieres of his own films. And his mother died without ever knowing that her son was a famous film director. That's how secretive he was. His own mom didn't know what he did for a living. How would you describe his general filmmaking style or kind of mood to people that don't know anything about his work?
First, I'm shocked about him working as a journalist. I genuinely find that so shocking because his films have such a humanitarian, emotional core to them. They're very simple stories about realistic people. So that's the first thing I would say. Yes. It's about people dealing with their real lives. I would also say that there's like a general tendency towards naturalism. A few of his films are quite exaggerated and campy in some ways, but most of them are just depictions of reality. Yeah. I would say that they are also pretty slow films, but with a lot of content. That said, I do think he's very creative. He was very creative. Oh, yeah. And the fact that he managed to try out so many different genres and still give his own spin to them, I think is quite an achievement. Yes. TLDR, I would say he is very sensitive, naturalistic, and introspective.
Definitely. Yes. I definitely mirror all those qualities.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yourself?
No, I would have mirrored those exact words when describing his work. But yeah, I would have kind of said similar things. It's very slow in terms of action, but rich and dense in terms of subject matter, themes, and topics that are being explored. Éric Rohmer articulates things that are inarticulable to many people, and he does it in such a precise but also very fluid way where he's not imposing how he feels about something. He's just presenting characters with all their complexities and really interesting situations that allows for so much to be kind of pulled out from it, but he's never really imposing his personal views or feelings onto it. Often centering around relationships and kind of romantic quandaries, shall we say. Yeah. Quite selfish people that desire connection and companionship and intimacy with other people, but they all seem to have obstacles in the way that allow them to actually fully realize that or reach that in a healthy way with another person.
Well, you said something quite interesting just then. I described his stories as naturalistic and real, and then you threw in nuance, which is, I think, the key word. Plot might have a very simple premise, but really what we are diving into when you watch a Rohmer film is the nuances of what that situation, that relationship, that, life brings to you. Very emotionally smart, this man.
Which is why he's so baffling and why I love him so much, because honestly, there are very few male directors that have that kind of ability to articulate emotion. And it just shows how well he knows people and how in tune he is with himself and the people around him. And it's just something that I don't think I've seen anyone do in the same way. I'm just constantly so impressed every time I watch something new for him. It's just shining a new light on a really particular aspect of like the human experience and then properly kind of exploring this entire grey area. And it's not really leaving you with a particular answer at the end. Sure. I wouldn't say, but like he's just a master at exploring grey areas.
Definitely.
And providing questions. I also wanted to ask you, how do you think his work slots into the rest of the new wave kind of style? When you look at a film like Pauline at the Beach, for example, and then compare it with something like Pierrot Le Fou, they are completely different films, but they're both synonymous with such a famous movement in cinema. that is defined, by these like particular characteristics that when I look at Éric Rohmer's films, it doesn't really feel like they possess in the same way, or at least not in an obvious way. So to you, what would you say are the similarities that you see, if any, between his work and someone like Godard or Truffaut or whatever?
I think he wouldn't call himself French New Wave. I could be wrong. Obviously, I think there are some similarities because, there was a search for truth and essence. They wanted to tell the story and for it to be meaningful. Meaningful is a word that describes Rohmer plots very well. I don't really see it slotting into the structuralist reforms of the French New Wave, because in those films it was all about pushing film to the limit. What can we get away with? Breathless is they do it in a very technical way. How can we tell a story that only film can tell using cuts, for example? So I guess I wouldn't slot it into French New Wave. I say historically in context it does. Yes. It does fit in, but I have a feeling that he was playing an entirely different game.
It's interesting that you say French New Wave, pushing boundaries, what can we get away with? And some people describe Éric Rohmer's work as being really boring, or there was like one famous criticism, I can't remember who said it, maybe it was Pauline Kael, but it was described as like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in that sense, it kind of makes sense how it slots into French New Wave, because it's testing the limits of cinema in the opposite way. Instead of it being super quick, super colourful, super technically advanced or whatever, it's almost being like, how can we push and test the audience through their patience and the idea of boredom and like what we're making people watch. Almost in like a Jean Dielman, type way, like Chantal Ackerman kind of vibe. It's like her being like, oh, I want to really push the audience and test how long they can sit with something.
That's very interesting. I think you've got a good point. And also,
thanks.
If films like those of Jean-Luc Godard or whatever want to push, as you said, the technical mastery, or to take a story and to bring it out of reality and put it into film, if that makes sense. In Rohmer's case, the film becomes second nature. It's like, how can we make the filmmaking invisible?
Yes.
I don't know if you agree, but I feel like most of his movies feel effortless.
Yes, it feels like water. It feels like you're not watching actors. It feels like it's very intentionally but masterfully done to make it look like you're watching real people. Yeah.
And I totally see what you mean. It's like the film becomes invisible. And that way, I think you're right in how it kind of pushes the boundaries.
I guess like when you talk about like technical elements, like, oh, it's not pushing boundaries in like an obvious way with the editing or whatever. But like the way that he operated on set was really quite unheard of for the time. Like he wouldn't have, towards the end of his career, he didn't use a first AD, he wouldn't use a script supervisor, he would do all of that himself. He would have really tiny crews and he would do quite a few of the roles himself. He worked with the same actors in nearly every single one of his films, which we'll get onto later. So it's like he's going to the extremes of maybe the New Wave movement by going so naturalistic that it becomes experimental, because he's trying to push the boundaries of like, oh, what is the filmmaking process that we see? Like you said, it's like he's trying to make that invisible to the point where it's just so fly on the wall, so observational that you feel like you're watching real life.
I will say, though, take a look at my Olympics merch.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Doc went to the Olympics.
I almost lost my wedding ring.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Where did you nearly lose it?
I took it off to eat a sandwich.
Oh, no. And then you ate it? You ate your wedding ring and the sandwich?
Now I have a question for you.
Oh, yeah.
Which film do you think sticks to the Rohmer formula the most?
Ooh.
Because I actually have a shout for that one.
I think I might have a shell as well. And I'm wondering if we have the same answer, because if we watched it together.
I think it might be.
Is it My Boyfriend's Girlfriend?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, or My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that one is like the formula.
It's a really interesting piece of work.
Piece of work.
Piece of work. That sounds so negative. Okay, so we're going to do the moral tales first. So a bit of background on the Moral Tales. So he began his career with this series of films. There's 6 of them. And each of the films in the cycle follows the exact same story, which I mentioned to you the last time I saw you, which is inspired by W. Murnau's Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans from 1927. Which is, the plot goes as follows. A man, married or otherwise committed to a woman, is tempted by a second woman, but eventually returns to the first. And that is the exact plot of all of these movies, which is so funny because I didn't even realise when I watched all these movies that they had the same plot and the same story, because it's all done in such a different way, with such, different...
And the highlight is always put on the emotional journey that the
Yes.
characters are going through, rather than the specifics of that journey.
Right. The first of the Moral Tales, I actually haven't seen because I cannot get a hold of it anywhere online, so that's my excuse. But it is called The Bakery Girl of Monceau. Monceau, I don't know, it's a French word. But it isn't really, it's not a feature-length film. Have you seen it?
I have
You
seen
have
it.
seen it, okay. I know what the story's about, but because I haven't been able to access it, which doesn't look great for me, would you like to talk about The Bakery Girl of Monceau?
I think what stands out to me most about this first film is the location. As we said before, it's very kind of straightforward and simple in terms of plot, but the location of the bakery and life moving around Paris is a very key point in that film.
Is it in black and white? This one?
Yes.
It is in black and white. Okay,
It
yeah.
is in black and white. So this film basically follows this dude who sees this girl and he's like, oh my God. But he doesn't have any way to contact her. So he kind of starts roaming around the city where he found her. So in his searching, he comes across a bakery where he takes a fancy to one of the girls who works there. But then when he's going to arrange a date with her, he bumps into the first lady.
And there we have a
There.
conundrum,
Right.
an absolute situation, a nightmare to be a part of.
I think shows a very early fixation of Rohmer to talk about working girls. Obviously, women is a very strong point in his filmography. I think he will often make a point about girls who are economically, they sustain themselves.
Yeah.
You think of the time, 1962, it does reflect in a way, kind of a way of life that is very politically charged, or at least it was back
yeah.
then, in a very neutral and just like straightforward way.
And it's kind of interesting because I guess we can touch on this now. It's like he's making a point of, oh yeah, so these girls, they now have like financial kind of economic independence and they're like working girls and they have these jobs and they have their own apartments and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, they're still oppressed because they cannot find equality or real respect and autonomy with the men that they surround themselves with.
Sure.
Which is particularly evident, I guess, in his next film in the series, Suzanne's Career. So, kind of brief lowdown of Suzanne's Career. It's essentially about a girl called Suzanne, and she becomes friends with these two kind of like intellectual kind of like fuckboys. One of them wants to sleep with her, and then he decides that he doesn't, and then the other guy ends up kind of dating her, and then they break up, and then it's her kind of being free from their presence, and then they want her more than ever because she's like free from them. But it is very interesting because it's kind of like you can have independence in one part of your life, but these women are still, they don't have fulfillment in other parts of their lives. Within capitalism, I guess they can provide for themselves and they can buy things and they can go on holidays and own their own apartments, but fundamentally they aren't free because they can't find love and commitment and like real respect.
Yeah. And this title, this film puts it right up to the title, Suzanne's Career. What is the meaning of this career? What role does it play in her life? Which I think is a journey that she goes through.
So also with Suzanne's Career, I think it's interesting that he introduces this idea in this particular film with the idea of men hiding behind intellectualism and using that as a justification for immoral behavior. So this is something that becomes like a thematic strand in pretty much all of his work, of men using their intellect or hiding behind the idea of genius or, you know, kind of being like deep thinkers or philosophers or like academics or whatever, and using this as a way to like deceive and manipulate women by justifying every single ridiculous thing that they do.
Well, not to dive into the deep end 49 minutes into the gig, but I feel like in terms of...
I am in fact paying Dom to be here.
I feel like it speaks volumes about how Rohmer perceives gender. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like the women in Rohmer's films, their pursuit is always to be authentic. And they pursue that through their emotional life. And I feel like the men usually support their gender identity through intellectualism. If the general like stereotype or archetype of manliness is physical fitness and strength, I think for Rohmer, the archetypical male is rational. And they may make some good points, but as you said, they hide their messiness behind this glamour of intellectualism
and all-knowingness. Yeah. And they use that as like a defense to not take any accountability or any responsibility for any of their mistakes or their actions and like the things that they do that hurt the women in their lives.
And I also feel like the women tend to fall towards intuition, whereas men, again, in his films, tend to be more about what other people have said. What have the other thinkers come up with?
Yes.
Whereas the women, maybe they're depicted as less studious. I don't know how to say that word.
Yeah.
While they are leagues more knowledgeable, but they just see things from their own perspective.
The men are all book smart and the girls are all life smart. And
there you go.
And we all know which is really more useful.
I actually can I can like count in my hands, in one hand, the like street smart boys.
Right. So it's really interesting that we see that in Suzanne's career and the idea of using that to manipulate women into sex. And then they're so mean to Suzanne. Like there's this whole thing about like, you know, she's doing well in her career. So they're like, oh, we don't have any money. Let's go out with Suzanne because we know that she'll pay for dinner. And then there's a scene where you see later on in the week, she's like, oh, I have no money to like do anything because like I've been seeing the guys and they've been basically exploiting me all
they've been
week,
living
so
off
I have
me.
nothing. And it's interesting that they're leeching off of her financial independence, but also like her emotional bandwidth and like also sexually exploiting her because they're both trying to like
get with her. Yeah. That's interesting, the commodification of her career.
Yes. So it's kind of like showing how feminism is exploited by men.
By men, yeah. These boys are terrible.
They're so horrible. Which brings us on to his next film in the Moral Tales, My Night at Maud's.
I think of the Moral Tales, this is the most accessible one.
Oh, really?
If I were to show it to the Moral Tales to a newcomer,
interesting,
I would go with Night at Maud's. Yeah.
I would say it's his least accessible in the Moral Tales.
Yeah? How come?
I would say Les Collectionneurs is the most accessible.
Ah, I was forgetting that one is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plot recap of My Night at Maud's is essentially about a man that meets this woman at a dinner party called Maud, and it's a really cold and stormy night, so he ends up staying over at her house to avoid the snow. And the two of them spend the whole evening talking around the kind of morals of whether or not they should have sex and his own relationship towards sex, desire, and dating and all this kind of stuff, and her essentially poking holes in his entire belief system. I struggled a little bit with My Night at Maud's.
Really?
I did enjoy it, but it's nowhere near one of my favourites.
Wow.
Absolutely not.
Well, I think you have more thoughts on it than I, so
well,
why don't you take the lead on this one?
I don't know. I don't know if it had a particularly strong emotional impact on me.
I see. I agree. I think it had, on me, more of an intellectual impact than an emotional.
These are my notes on it, which is pretty sparse. So, to me, My Night at Maud's is about someone who thinks he really knows himself, and then he's thrown into an encounter with someone who basically exposes all his contradictions. And a large part of that is due to his faith and the way that he seems to think that makes him immune from doing bad things or being wrong, particularly in like a romantic context. She's kind of exposing his flaws in his logic in relation to religion.
Which is, it's very, like, it hits hard because he then continues to, like, perpetuate this bad behavior with another girl, like, after he's supposed to have learned his lesson.
Yes.
Bro.
What was your, the impact that My Night at Maud had on you? Especially the intellectual impact that you referred to?
I think in terms of what we had been talking about before, this movie really tries to rationalize the male sex drive, to give it a system on how it works, and to also give it a meaning. Yeah, a dude trying to rationalize his way out of just desire, and then you have him opposed to this woman who is just in complete control.
And it's also, I think, interesting to mention, she's the first single parent. And he has quite a few women that are single parents. Interesting that she's kind of got this perspective where she's very, like, free and kind of, as you said, let things be as they are. And that's very much influenced by, again, what we were talking about earlier, by her lived experiences of being a woman and her experiences, I guess, of single motherhood and being failed by the men in her life. So she kind of has a more, like, laid back approach to dating, I guess, because she knows that it's maybe not going to be as serious, or she's going to be disappointed.
She's seen a little bit how meaningless it can be.
Yes.
So it's a little, she takes it a little more chill. Hey, why stress over it when, who knows? Why do you think it has had this long-lasting legacy? Because as you said, a lot of people would say that that's the most influential film.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is?
I think out of all his films, maybe controversial, I think that's the one that's maybe the most film bro-y type film. And I think it's the one that maybe men find easiest to relate to or to enjoy. Out of all his films, it seems more boyish. And I think that's why it didn't connect to me, because it doesn't feel as emotional. It's more just like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But it didn't impact me in the same emotional way that his other films have. And I think it's probably more popular among men. So this leads us to our next film, La Collectionneuse. So it's number 4 in the Moral Tales. It's the first film that's shot in colour, which is really interesting. And it's one of my favourites of his entire collection of work. I really, really love this film. So plot recap of La Collectionneuse is essentially about these two men that are on holiday, and they have this summer house by the lake, and it's really gorgeous. And they invite this friend of a friend called Heidi. And the entire movie is these two guys really, really trying to sleep with her. And they become increasingly frustrated and, like, angry and aggressive towards her because she doesn't want to sleep with them because they're assholes. They're also angry as well because she's on holiday and she has other people that she's, like, hooking up with and dating, and she's just, like, having fun and living her summer life. And they're very angry about the fact that, like, in their eyes, they're like, oh, if all these other people can, like, have you, then why can't we? And it's kind of about male entitlement to the female body and about the ego, the male ego.
Yeah, the men see themselves as more than her.
Yes.
Smarter, better at sex, maybe, with a better place in the world. They actually, I think they even tell her, like, when are you gonna do something with your life? The men spend the whole movie trying to prove that they are above her, that they are more in control, that they are more unbothered by whatever evil machinations she might be up to. Whereas it's actually her who's just like, she is genuinely just living her best life.
Yeah.
She's entirely unbothered by these men, and she just want to have a nice time and enjoy her life.
Yeah.
But she's not.
They want to make her feel small, and they want to
put her in her place.
Put her in her place, essentially. Yeah, they want to teach her a lesson because they think that, like, oh, who are you to be able to have power and, like, sexual autonomy? But it's very interesting because it's also so funny.
Yeah.
Like, there's this whole scene where they're at the house and someone visits that is, like, an antiques collector, and then one of the men goes into this, like, fit of, like, anger and rage over the fact that this person likes this vase, and he has this like massive like rant about it where he ends up like smashing the vase, and he just like obliterates this guy because he's like an antiques collector. It obviously relates to kind of like the thing of the film and this idea of like obtainment, and it's like, oh, he's obtained this like thing of like beauty that he wants, and these two boys, they're like living in this house with this girl all summer that they find attractive and they want to sleep with, and they can't like have her, which is so funny to me.
I was arrested by that like first scene. It's like a prologue, right, at the beginning, where it's like 6 or 7 shots of her, the main character, well, the girl character, Heidi, and it's like, it's honestly like 6 shots of the camera ogling her, and we go from the toes to the knees to the back of the knee, the clavicle, the torso, everything, right? The camera really like deconstructs her like piece by piece. But it's interesting that the movie also doesn't shy away from sexualizing the male character of it. But what we get in the camera is just like this one long continuous shot of this guy in really tight, really like, you know, small Speedos, basically. That leave very little to the imagination.
It's one of the most like overtly sexual films. What do you make of, or why do you think that this was the first film that he deliberately chose to use color for?
I'm not sure.
Because it's interesting. I mean, to me, this is one of his most visually like beautiful. It's really lush. It has the most gorgeous like kind of really sensual imagery of like sunsets and people swimming in the sea and the lake. But I think, at least from what I've read of his reasoning behind it, it seems like for him, the color of this film kind of highlights that kind of sensuality and like lushness. It adds something to the story because it's adding to the sexual tension. And
it's interesting that if the conflict is sex, the conflict is not death, the conflict is life. And so the movie is very vibrant and very, because everything happens there in life. So.
So I believe we just finished talking about La Collectionneuse. That was the last bit. Me and Doc just had some ratatouille off camera. So that was very nice.
It was really good, thank you.
It's okay. So now we will talk about number 5 in the moral tales, number 5 of 6, which is, dun dun dun, drumroll please, Claire's knee.
Oh, the infamous one.
Very scandalous. So would you please do the honor of doing a little description of what Claire's knee is about?
I don't remember the plot very specifically, but I'm still going to try.
Okay.
So Claire's knee is about this professor, and I believe he's taking a holiday.
Professor of what? I don't know.
Shenanigans.
Professional creep.
For real.
Professional disturbance. Professor going on holiday. He's basically staying with his friend and he's about to get married. That's kind of like a big thing in the film.
Right.
He's about to get married and to someone that he really respects and apparently cares for and loves and all this kind of stuff. And then he's on holiday and his friend also has like another friend staying with her, and she has 2 children, and they're both teenage girls. One of the teenage girls is Claire, and she comes into the film quite late on in the film. Like it's after like maybe 40-45 minutes that we actually see Claire for the first time. And the other teenage girl, I can't remember her name, but she has a huge crush on this guy. And the whole thing is kind of him being tempted by Claire and basically feeding off of this like teenage girl's crush on him to like boost his own ego. And he sees Claire and his infatuation with her as like a test of his relationship. And kind of him proving something to himself about his restraint. And his entire infatuation with Claire starts off when she's climbing a ladder and he sees her knee exposed and he has this overwhelming desire to caress her knee. I found it the most uncomfortable, I think, probably of his entire filmography to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's so disgusting the way that he justifies his behavior, the extent that he goes to kind of like rationalize this really like perverse pursuit of this like teenage girl, and the way that he manipulates both of the teenage girl's feelings and emotions. Like he uses the teenage girl that has a crush on him, he like kisses her and all this kind of stuff, and then he like kind of like throws her away afterwards, and he's like, oh, like that can't happen again kind of thing, but he's like, oh, I'm glad I did it because it affirms how much I really love my partner that I'm about to marry. And then his whole infatuation with Claire, he basically like tries to make her break up with her boyfriend, and he's like, oh, he's not good enough for you. And then he tries to make her feel like really bad and like really like belittle her and like kind of just dismiss her own autonomy over her like dating life. He kind of like emotionally manipulates and kind of gaslights her to the point where they have this confrontation where she like starts crying, and then he basically pins the whole thing on her. And then as soon as he sees her showing like vulnerability or like weakness, that's when he loses his crush on her. It's again similar to like Collectioners. It's like this thing of like, I'm going to put this woman in her place because she's so attractive but she doesn't want to sleep with me, so I'm going to make her feel so bad about herself that she then wants my validation to feel better about herself, and that's when I'm going to basically like drop her and kind of teach her a lesson. He's like, it's so sick.
It's so nasty.
It's so sick and twisted. And he's like fully like in his 40s, and she's like a 15, 16-year-old girl. It's a very taboo subject, the whole thing of like age gaps in relationships, particularly in relation to underage girls, older men. Why do you think he chose this particular dynamic? And do you think he explores it well? And what do you think he's saying through it?
I think, as we've said before, the rationalization of things is kind of a recurrent subject with Rohmer. How a guy could rationalize to themselves their attraction to, an underage girl, and how this character does just an admirable amount of mental gymnastics to justify to himself why
this is okay.
Why he's not a bad guy, why he's in the right. Not only having these feelings, which is something he can't control, but what he can control is how he behaves towards the girls and what he does towards them. So I don't know. For me, this one feels like the most direct takedown. If La Collectionneuse was the sexiest film, I think this one is the angriest film.
Yeah.
I think this one is like the one with the most spite.
Yeah. Spite from Rohmer himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Towards
characters.
Men. Yeah, towards men. Yeah. You're right. There is so much contempt towards men in this film, which is really interesting.
And I usually hate man-hatey things. I think masculinity is awesome and just as femininity, but this is like so clever. This is not man-hatey. This is like genuine problems with how we construct masculinity.
I would trust him to take a subject like this and handle it well.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that I would not with this subject.
I'm going to say most people.
Most people.
I'd be like, let's just not
leave it alone.
go there.
Maybe don't do that. Why do you think it's so controversial?
Well, I think in a way, like it or not, we all of us end up aligning with him because his sex drive is awoken by the visual stimulus of this lady's knee, this girl's knee. Claire. And he creates a whole system of meaning and emotion around this girl by this visual excitement that he got from watching something. And isn't that what we all get when we watch films? We watch something, we make a symbol of it, and we give it meaning. So I feel in a way this movie is kind of very attacking because that guy, as much as we might troll him, we all behave like him sometimes. Maybe not towards underage people. I would expect not.
I would hope not.
But we all construct meaning that way, and all of us have the capacity to be vapid and stupid with it. Do you indulge these feelings of yours like he does, or do you learn to kind of grow past them and not let that be a reflection of what you're putting out there?
Right.
But I think it's just straight up controversial because you can't not talk about PDF-philia and not when you bring up this film.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's interesting what you're saying about like how we relate to it and how it attacks us, because we're all guilty of that thing where like you maybe create a new belief system to fit a specific narrative in your life.
Especially when you fancy someone.
Especially when you like someone. You've seen me do this multiple times. Like, I crush on someone and then I'm like, oh, yes, I'm just going to like change my entire idea of what they are as a person and what our life could be like together based on absolutely no evidence for someone that is objectively a piece of shit.
In your defense, you know when to pull out. You know when to be like, deuces, I'm not happy here. Bye.
In my defense, I was hoodwinked.
In my defense, Your Honor, I was bamboozled.
I was bamboozled. Yeah, it just kind of shows how, like, as people, we all define ourselves by our belief system and our values and what we, like, hold close to, how we think we are as people. How that can just be so thrown into, like, flux, and how not super reliable that is.
Yeah.
And how sometimes people can act in ways that directly contradict their own beliefs, but they don't even realize it. Or someone could say, oh, I'm really loving about my wife, but then, you know, they're going around like pursuing teenage girls. So it's kind of, again, our contradictions that maybe we're not aware of.
Yeah.
And it kind of points the finger at everyone and kind of, okay, yeah, we all do this in some way.
I think the whole point of the moral tales is to make us question.
Yeah.
How would we act? Would we fall to the same misconceptions of these people? Or would we handle the situation a bit better?
Yeah.
And I think you raised a very interesting point. I think if the romance was less taboo, the message would be less impactful. Because it being so taboo is a very integral part of what the film is.
Agreed. So the next and the final moral tale is Love in the Afternoon.
Ooh.
You've not seen this one?
I don't think I have.
Cool. It's about a man that's married. He's got a child. His wife is pregnant. They're apparently very happy.
Alleged happiness.
Alleged happiness. And then the film basically opens with this like prologue that's like a fantasy sequence, which is really interesting. It's like a dream sequence of this man monologuing about how he walks around Paris basically looking for sex but not actually doing anything. And he cannot see women as people. He only sees women as objects, and he just walks around and he cannot stop staring at women and thinking about having sex with them. And that's what his monologue is about. And then the film opens with him and he's like with his wife and he says he's happy and all this kind of stuff. But then he meets a friend from his past. He hasn't seen her in 10 years and they start like a friendship. And the friendship slowly becomes much more than a friendship. And it becomes like kind of like emotional cheating because they're talking around the idea of like being together and sleeping together. And then the film basically ends with him being in a room with this woman and they're about to have sex, and as soon as he sees her naked, he like runs out the building and goes home to his wife, and they both see each other and they have a conversation and they both start crying, and it kind of implies that like she knows that he's been cheating or flirting with the idea of cheating, and she's so relieved to see him at home and to see him happy to see her that she breaks down in tears. And it's this like really horrible moment. Like it is very emotionally like heavy.
That's quite strong.
It's very strong, yeah. And it's really interesting that he ends the entire moral tales on that note, because it's very like abrupt and very, to me, it doesn't feel positive at all. Like quite a few people were describing it when I was reading up on Letterboxd, and people saying, oh, like it's a nice like end to it. But I was like, it feels really cynical. It feels really bleak, because the whole film is kind of him, people that have this desire for love, but once they have it, they feel suffocated by it. Rohmer's first film where he's really critiquing like monogamy and this idea of like he feels caged even though there is no cage. Like he technically has like everything that someone could want. He has like a lovely wife and a family and a nice house. He has a really stable job. He's a lawyer and all this kind of stuff.
Just all those things.
Just like an average, yeah, like life. But he still feels like so burdened by the possibility of like desire, and the idea that that is like completely eliminated, that almost makes him want it more.
Yeah.
And the fact that it opens with a literal like dream sequence of him, I think it's like he has like a necklace or something, and the necklace is like glowing. It's really weird.
Oh wow.
And the necklace like glows and allows him to like basically have interactions with women that lead to sex. So like he's just walking around the street and then women are coming up to him like wanting to sleep with him, and that's his fantasy. And then in his waking life he's just walking around looking at women expecting that to happen, and it's really odd and really creepy.
But it's very common, I think, for men, gay or straight or whatever, to go around and to immediately like look at someone and to immediately listen like, okay, sexually, where am I with this person?
But yeah, just a really interesting film about people that just cannot commit, and that feels like that's a really relevant thing that comes up in all his films, and this idea of intimacy and the intimacy that we think we want versus the intimacy that we actually want. And a lot of people feel that they should want emotional intimacy and these like kind of conventional monogamous heteronormative relationships, but the reality is for a lot of these characters that once they obtain this and this standard that is kind of seen as like the norm, they feel trapped by it in a way that makes them self-sabotage. And a lot of these characters are just self-sabotaging and kind of like pushing the limits of like, how far can I go without actually cheating, you know? And it's also really interesting because for the girl, she's very much just like, if you don't want to be with your wife, just like leave her. And she's like, why do you hold this like idea so close to you that like men shouldn't cheat? She's like, everyone cheats. And it's really interesting because she's so like pragmatic about that and just like everyone that's married cheats, but he's still holding on to this idea that marriage is like special and people are committed to each other and they don't sleep with other people. And it's like him basically just realizing that his entire everything that he values is kind of fake and how it's not real.
I feel like in terms of the moral tales, this one serves really well as the last one because it really asks the why. I think a lot of the moral tales are like presenting an interesting situation or like an interesting dynamic. I think the most straightforward with presenting the dynamic as the selling point is Claire's name. But I think this one, the whole movie leads up to, is building up to this one thing, and then at the end it just gets like, you know, subverted very quickly over something that's been there this whole time.
I think that's why I found it so bleak. It didn't feel like a positive, optimistic thing to leave on. It was kind of him being like, oh yeah, all of these problems are because of expectations that we created for ourselves, and that's why everyone's miserable.
It's kind of, from what I'm getting, it's kind of at the end it's saying like, we need to talk.
Yeah.
That's like the ending it's giving.
It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Monogamy's the elephant in the room. There's also something else that's really funny about this film, quickly, that all the women in all his films have an appearance in this movie. In the dream sequence where he's imagining all these different women coming up to him on the street, it's all the women that have been in his films. Claire from Claire's Knee, have like everyone, and it's just like a lovely like cinematic crossover of everyone.
Do you think
that's been in his films.
Rohmer sees himself in the main character?
Ooh.
Because if it's all these women coming together, all these women also played a role in Rohmer's real life.
Oh, that's really interesting. I always got the feeling that he saw himself more in the women. And got the feeling that he maybe felt like a bit like an outsider, maybe, for being a bit more of an emotional or like emotionally intelligent man. And he maybe didn't identify as much with men. I kind of got that feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know. There were also quite a few rumors that he was actually gay and he was like closeted and all this kind of stuff. So like,
it did make me think all the secrecy. You know?
All the secrecy. But yeah, it does kind of scream closet. I think he maybe he's scared of men. Because they're like the antithesis of like how he sees himself. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe this archetypal male is that you know who a man is supposed to be.
Yeah, it seems like he's kind of grappling with his own sense of masculinity through those men.
Yeah. I would never be brave enough to make a series of films called The Moral Tales. I don't want to give my morality to anybody. Nobody needs to live with any of what's going on here.
Yeah, my morality's private to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I've got some general questions and kind of just like think things about the moral tales in general.
Cool.
Do we need to wait for you to finish with your cream?
No, I'm putting on one answer.
Questions for you. My first question. I've written, let's talk about the fragmentation of bodies, specifically women's bodies, but also, as you noted, it also shows in the male characters in La Collectionneuse. So how he takes certain parts of women, the niche, the shoulders, the legs, the clavicle, the montage in the film that just highlights certain sections of her body, but you never see her face within that montage. Whose perspective do you think Rohmer wanted us to take in this montage? Is the gaze from the male character or from Rohmer? And do you think Rohmer derives pleasure from it? What's the narrative purpose of this montage?
In general, a lot of objectification of women comes hand in hand with what that object is made for. And it can come off as quite exploitative. And I've never felt that way about in a Rohmer film, that he was being exploitative.
Never.
And I think something that really drives it that way is that he does it with kindness. The montage of Heidi in La Collectionneuse, even though it's shots of her body and just us like allowing voyeuristic pleasure in us to be looking at this beautiful girl, I don't feel like it happens in any sort of predatory scenario. To me, it almost feels like Rohmer is presenting us with this being, with this sexual being, and just presenting it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. To be like, this is the lady that we are going to be talking about. This is what she looks like. This is what people see in her. And it's up to you to find out who she really is. I guess that movie could be like the most like slut-shamey of all his films. You know, in comparison. But the fact that it doesn't ever portray her as a victim, as vulnerable, or as stupid makes me think that he has an easier time understanding how women can be sexual and it not be a threat to men or masculinity. Maybe some more evidence to him being gay. Who knows? What about you?
I kind of agree. I guess like I feel like with that montage, he's definitely portraying it from the perspective of the other male characters in that movie, and it's kind of being like, oh, here's the subject of this film. That montage is like us seeing her from their perspective. They don't see her as a person, they just see her as like a collection of like body parts essentially. And I guess same with Claire's knee. It's kind of like the fact that a knee could be a focus of sexual pleasure or like in any way is so absurd that it's kind of making a point of just kind of mocking like male desire in general. But I did also feel uncomfortable watching that montage at the same time because it is also still just like a male director that's on camera like, okay, we're just gonna get a shot of your tits right now and then also gonna get a shot of just basically your vagina. And it's just
let us not forget that the person who was in charge of the money said like, oh, let's get this shot of you in the bikini.
The one thing that reassures me, and we spoke about this recently, is the fact that he constantly worked with the same actors in his entire filmography all points towards the fact that they all liked him as a person and they liked working with him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have repeatedly worked with him. So that makes me think that he was a nice person to work with. He was safe, he was collaborative and respectful and all these kinds of things. It is uncomfortable, but I feel like the discomfort is there for a reason because it should make you feel uncomfortable that the men are choosing to see her in that way. So I feel like it does have narrative purpose, but at the same time, it is an uncomfortable watch.
Maybe he's just French.
Yeah, he is European. So
yeah, I think it's interesting, and he's very empathic with his female characters.
Yeah, definitely. He allows them so much, grace and empathy and just genuine, just space to kind of like articulate how they feel. I know in a way that I'm gonna say no other male director really.
No,
I have, or I don't know, maybe there are a couple, but like he really lets them sit and articulate really complex feelings, and he allows them to like kind of fumble over that and not necessarily do it in the most like articulate way, but he just gives them time to talk about things in their own messy way, and I really like how he lets people be messy.
I think a very recurring theme in his filmography is societal expectations. I think
Definitely.
often in the men, it comes out in the rationalization of their love lives, of their emotional language. And I don't want to get too into it right now because we haven't spoken about this, but I think The Green Ray is like the movie that, gets it like, perfect bullseye.
Yeah. If you could describe it as one word, what would you say?
Entanglement. It's when people get close to each other and they get,
A little bit tussled up.
caught up with each other.
Tussle.
And then when you separate them,
It leaves
pulls.
marks. Yeah.
Leaves mark. What about you?
Ooh, that's such a good word. I feel like intimidated. My word to describe the moral tales.
Boring.
Restless. Yeah, restless. It's definitely got that kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of like energy pulsing through it, where it's
Yeah.
like people just want more and they're kind of just unsatisfied and like itching for something, and it's just
And
like
the-
restless summer energy,
Yeah.
or not summer energy.
Kind of,
Summers,
yeah.
summers. We are now on to the next section of the video, which we're now going to stop putting timers on because we've been talking
We've been waffling
for
for.
two
I wonder how long
hours.
this video is, and I wonder how far along we are. We've been recording for 2 hours and 13
At
minutes.
this point, yeah, 2 hours.
And the thing is, this is what we do when we hang out.
Yeah.
We just choose a topic and just
We just yap.
Yeah.
Also, I hope everyone's appreciating my fart poster. The
Book of
Farts. Yeah, I thought that was really nice. Only appropriate to be above my bed. This is where I fart the most. Cool.
So how much should we aim for per
I
movie?
reckon 5 minutes
Yeah,
per
I think
movie.
So that's just under an hour more of just films. And then on top of that, whatever other questions you might have. So just so we know what we're getting ourselves into.
Doc is like, can I go home?
I want to go to bed.
I want to be done with this. So it's going to be a mammoth editing.
This is
task
going to
for
be
me.
definitely over 3 hours of footage.
Shall I just upload it raw
Ooh.
and see who watches?
Gee.
I'll just send it to all my
But
worst enemies.
I don't want you to edit 4 hours.
No, it's fine.
Oh.
I'm so fine. So, Comedies and Proverbs. I don't really have too much to say about this before going into it. I don't know too much about why it's called Comedies and Proverbs, but I guess I do because each one, there are some that are deeply funny, and then Proverbs, it's like, I guess, similar
Well, I
to a moral tale.
went to film school twice. And before I got a useless degree, I flopped in one. And in that we had a
both
course.
flopped in our first degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that in common.
Flopping is the first part, the first step towards winning.
Yeah,
which-
embarrassment is the price you pay for
Yeah. Confidence?
mediocrity. I don't know.
The first film school I went to, we had a module on Éric Rohmer. And actually, I don't remember specifically, but I think it's not supposed to be comedies as in funny. I think a more accurate translation is fables.
Oh, that would make sense.
I think it's supposed to be fables and... What is the other one? Comedies and...
Proverbs.
Yeah, fables and proverbs. So yeah, I think that's why it's called.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I don't think it would be very easy to market fables and proverbs.
It sounds a bit fairy tale,
Yeah.
of Bible-esque kind of vibe.
Yeah, you expect some fantastical story,
Yeah.
and then it's just this lady crying because she's nervous.
Yeah. So the first one in this series is The Aviator's Wife. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this one?
I think I did, but I don't remember much of it.
Yeah,
Do you
to be
mind?
honest, I think it's fairly... I don't want to say forgettable, but I think it's slightly mid. But yeah, it's essentially about a guy that thinks that his girlfriend is cheating on him. So he follows her around all day. And as he's following her around, he bumps into this other girl who's like a teenager in high school. And they basically spend the day like stalking his girlfriend to find out whether or not she's cheating. And it ends with a really emotionally intense conversation that lasts nearly 30 minutes with him speaking with his girlfriend and kind of confronting her about his own jealousies and insecurities in the relationship. And she's crying and she's upset and it's really horrible. But yeah, it's an interesting one because I guess it's the first movie that's explicitly about jealousy, how his irrational fears about the relationship reflect more about himself and his own insecurities in him. And the movie ends in a very bleak way of like him and his girlfriend, I think they break up, and then he's like been hanging out with this girl all day, and then it ends the movie with him deciding to follow her because he's then like jealous of her and her boyfriend. So it's kind of like this full circle thing about like these like habits and behaviors we have that like kind of haunt us, that are defined, we're controlled by our insecurities.
It's
So that's
interesting,
quite
yeah. But as we
interesting.
see, especially compared to the moral tales, it's much more focused on like what it's trying to say. Is he actually an aviator?
No.
Ah.
No. I don't actually know why it's called
It's
The
got an
Aviator's
interesting
Wife.
name then.
I feel like there maybe was someone in the film that was a pilot, but I can't remember. Very odd. Actually, no. She is having an affair. The girlfriend that he suspects is having an affair is actually having an affair, and she's having an affair with a pilot.
Oh.
And they end up following him when he's with his wife.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that's what it is.
I see.
That's what it is.
Although now it's like 3 degrees of separation. That's fascinating.
Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Because it's kind of aligning us with the fact that she's kind of the victim in this whole thing. So that's The Aviator's Wife. So the second one is, of course, The Green Ray. Which is maybe Rohmer's most famous film.
I see that.
Most well known.
Yeah, I see that.
I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
It's definitely the one that is maybe most celebrated with cinephiles, I would say. So what would you say The Green Ray is about in one word?
Stress.
Yeah.
Honestly, stress.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I jump into a plot summary, do you want to describe it with one word?
I would have said it's about loneliness. Yeah.
So the film follows is it summer vacation?
Yeah.
Of this lady who goes out. She lives in Paris, I believe, and she goes out to the countryside. She wants to just have a vacation where she completely leaves her normal life and experiences something unique, maybe a romance, whatever it is, something special and magical, something to give her a bit of purpose, kind of. As the film goes, she has different conversations with different people. And yeah, as you said, loneliness is a very big theme in the film. And she expresses how she wants to also, maybe more than anything else, have that connection, have a special connection with someone. And she looks for it. And for the most part, she feels very misunderstood. There's a scene where her friends are just like, why is she so weird, lol? And the poor girl is just really going through it. Oh, I feel so bad for her. Eventually, though, she does kind of make a connection with this guy. And they end up, she hears from this other group of people about this green ray, which is the very last, like, trickle of sunshine right before the sunset. And it's very rare to see it. It can only happen under certain conditions. And suddenly she becomes fixated with witnessing that. And it is through that she gets to make a connection, however fleeting and temporary, with this guy who is also looking to witness this. And the movie ends there with the characters finally reaching this moment of like conclusion, of witnessing this.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Even just like hearing you describe it again, I'm like, God damn, that's a really good film.
He really aced
really
it with that
really
one.
nice.
Yeah.
He really did something.
What about you? What are your thoughts on it?
Honestly, I think the first time I watched it, I obviously felt really bad for her, and I really loved the film, but I also felt like she was being slightly pathetic. And I was kind of like, oh God, like she's kind of annoying because she's just like walking around crying all the time.
Yeah,
and, like,
she does cry a lot.
She does, because she's pretty much crying the entire film, just walking around crying. And I think the first time I saw that, I didn't have as much patience for it because I was like, she's got a great life.
You're
like,
good.
You're fine. You got a nice job. Your whole concern is like, worrying about where you're going to go on holiday and all this kind of stuff. But the more I've thought about it, especially recently, I feel like this has become a huge topic, at least from what I've seen on my like Twitter pages and all this kind of stuff. But of women kind of feeling like the dating pool or like idea of modern dating is just so bleak, and wanting to have that genuine connection and fulfillment with someone, but just not being able to find it in any way, but also being shamed for wanting that, because we're fed so much messaging nowadays about how like, oh, platonic fulfillment and platonic friendships and that kind of love is just as fulfilling and like just as important. Platonic love is incredibly fulfilling and important, but you also can't take away from the fact that romantic love is also part of our human kind of makeup and psychology of what we want. To see this film now, and I think I relate to it in a different way than I did when I was younger, of being like, oh, here's someone that on paper has everything, but they can't get this one thing that's like so fundamental to the human experience, and like the one thing that when we define what it's like to be alive, people always talk about the joy of like being in love and like romantic love.
I mean, pivot to a film that has nothing to do with anything, but Interstellar, saying that love transcends all boundaries and something.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, right. When you put it in human terms.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. Objectively, she does have a lot of great things, and she's extremely privileged in many, many different ways. But at the same time, that frustration of being like, I just want to be seen by someone.
Yeah.
And that's so upsetting. And the fact that in this film, it makes a point of like, she's around her friends and she's with all these groups of people, but she's still so lonely and no one truly sees her. And they're all kind of like not super nice to her.
Yeah.
And it's like that one thing that is like, human connection is as evasive and as rare as the green ray. You know, that's essentially the metaphor and the line that the film is making of being like, the chances of her meeting this one great person is the same. And like, that's why those two things become entangled for her. Because she's kind of...
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Like in the other films, people just seem to fall into relationships very easily, and it's like quite like simple and straightforward and convenient or whatever. But for this film, the whole struggle is just finding one person, which is interesting because all the other films are about having that person and the struggles within a relationship.
Yeah.
But this is the only one of like, oh, I can't actually find a person
anyone.
in a relationship. I can't find anyone.
Even like friends.
Yeah.
She has friends, but friends
they're not
who like...
great. They're not great friends. They don't truly see her. Anyone.
It's interesting though, because so many are about men grappling with their desire to be desired, and they rationalize all different ways around it. But for how troubled she is and how much she spends the entire film crying.
Drag.
This character just knows what she wants.
Yeah.
And she wants to get it, you know?
It's quite simplistic. But the obstacle is so huge. So the stakes are so high.
Apathy. What are we going to do?
So the next film in the Comedies and Proverbs is A Good Marriage.
Why did you start with that one? I don't know if I've seen this one or not.
Okay, so this film is so fucking funny. Like, just to sum up the madness of this film, it's about this woman that becomes fixated by this idea that she needs to get married. And I guess it's that kind of like internal body clock or whatever. Yeah, of like, I need to get married.
Yeah.
And then she meets this like one random lawyer, and then she starts like telling everyone like, oh, I'm getting married soon. And everyone's like, oh, who? And she's like, oh, I don't know yet, but I'm getting married soon. And she basically becomes fixated on the idea that she's going to marry this lawyer, even though he wants really nothing to do with her. And it's incredibly funny just watching her go to ridiculous lengths to try and like obtain this man. And there's one scene in an office where she turns up to his office and she's basically just like, why don't you want to marry me? And he's like, oh, I'm just like really, I'm divorced. Like, I just don't really want to do that. And she's so angry that when she leaves the office, she like pushes an old woman down the stairs. And it also has a crazy end scene. Do you remember the end scene?
No.
It ends with her. So after going through all of this and being rejected by this man, she sits on the train. And then as she's on the train, she looks up and sees this man sitting opposite her. And she kind of looks at him and smiles. And we realise that she's going to do this whole thing again. Because she has this infatuation with this lawyer because of like this one chance encounter. So it's clearly like a pattern of behaviour. And we realise she's going to do it again.
Interesting.
And then the credits drop and it's like crazy credits in this movie. It's like really like hard like techno music.
Wow. Fascinating.
It's very funny. my notes that I took for this is kind of about someone that's trying to rush life, and she won't let life flow at its own pace. And she's just trying to like skip to the end, and she doesn't really want to go through any of the normal like hardships or challenges or journeys to get to that point. She just wants to be comfortable.
Well, it's the pressure of achieving these things. She wants to be married, but she doesn't really mind that much about who it is, evidently.
Yeah. Very funny.
It's so nefarious putting a timer on what you're supposed to do as a woman.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Great use of the word nefarious.
Éric Rohmer. Nefarious.
So the next film in the Comedies and Proverbs is My Girlfriend's Boyfriend.
Yes.
Which is... I'm very excited to talk about this.
I quite like this movie. We had a really fun time watching it.
We watched this
when
together.
We did. Yeah.
One of my favourite memories of watching this with you was this one scene where she like comes onto the screen and she was wearing an outfit, and you were just like, oh my god, she's snatched. Because she has like, I mean, she does objectively have like a tiny waist, but we were like in silence for pretty much the entire film, and you were just so shook by how skinny she was. So do you want to describe what My Girlfriend's Boyfriend is about?
Yeah, although I feel like you might have to correct me here and there.
Okay.
The film follows an unlikely friendship which forms between two women. And
They meet at the pool.
they meet at the pool, yeah. And the protagonist, she becomes like a little bit like fixated on this lady, and also on her boyfriend, who at first she just brushes off. But then she goes away. The friend goes away for whatever reason. She's like gone from the movie for a large chunk of it. And suddenly she starts to be more drawn to this boyfriend. Now, bear in mind, she's got a boyfriend of her own. But she starts to like, you know, focus more on this other dude. Eventually, friend comes back. And they are about to have this argument where they confront each other about, you've been seeing my boyfriend. How dare you? And it starts that way. Very quickly, they realize that the person that they were actually looking for is there all along in the form of the other boyfriend, my friend's boyfriend. And at the end, they just kind of swap boyfriends and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
In a way, this one is very, I think, whimsical.
Very whimsical.
Because the story just kind of like resolves itself also in a matter of like 30 seconds, genuinely.
Yes, very well described.
The use of color in this film.
Yeah, okay, so let's first of all, I want to talk about the setting, the color, and I also want to talk about the idea of scrutiny, because for me, this film is about the people that we think we should be with versus the people that we actually want to be with. And both of them, both the girls in this film have this idea about who they want their partners to be. And the main girl in this kind of film, she's very much intent on this idea of like her partner affirming her social status and kind of like clout, I guess.
Yeah.
And ultimately, by the end of the film, they both realise that the heart wants what it wants, and they should just be with the people that they actually love instead of being with people that make them look a certain way. So, interestingly, I would say it's his first film, maybe only film that I can think of about class and social status.
Oh, yeah.
And
we see that
explicitly about that in relationships. Yeah.
And we see that in their flats.
Yes.
How they live, because it also plays a part in the plot.
And it's really funny because, okay, a couple of things that I want to touch upon in terms of like the setting of their town. It's this very like open feeling space. Like it really stands out in the entire of his filmography because it feels like a really distinct looking town.
Yeah.
You can tell that a lot of thought went into the location planning of that film because each environment that they shoot a scene in really adds something to the plot.
Yeah.
Because it's these very open spaces that they still feel so suffocated and stifled given the secrecy that the characters are operating and kind of basically cheating and that kind of stuff.
I think you put it very well when you said that the movie is about scrutiny, because the characters are in this very open space. They have economic freedom, kind of. they really like can act the way that they choose, but they still get so much angst from their choice because what they choose reflects on them. So yeah, I think you were absolutely right when you to say that the movie is about scrutiny and
Right.
about how we act when we're being perceived.
But really interestingly, her apartment is shaped like a panopticon.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when you look out the window and it's this huge kind
Yeah.
of like overwhelming, like this feeling of being watched?
Yeah,
And it
this
has
huge
like,
plaza.
yeah, it's a massive plaza and it has this me plaza and it has this like huge pressure of like having to make this choice of like who's the right person.
Yeah.
And that feels so like threatening in the film that it has this very like tense atmosphere. So it's a very sad film, but it also is very whimsical, which is really odd because again the color thing, like we have to talk about the fact that like they're always wearing specific colors, and by the end they've switched to wearing the colors that the other person was always wearing because they've switched boyfriends, and like the colors mirror each other, and it's kind of this like a blending as they kind of mesh and switch, you
Definitely,
know, and become one.
It's
really
just also
surprised by
just
it.
such a fun watch.
Yeah,
It's very engaging. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my god.
yeah, it's got everything. So the next one in the Comedies and Proverbs is The Four Adventures of Renette and Mirabelle.
I have not seen this one.
Okay, it's slightly more forgettable for me, slightly less memorable. It's essentially about friendship, and it's about two people that become friends that are very different people, and it's kind of about friendship as a form of reinvention and the conflict in friendship through like clashing values. So one of them is like a city girl, one of them is like a more country girl, and they both at some point live with the other person in the city or the country. And it's also again another film where like the environment directly affects
Yeah.
the plot and like the lives of these characters, and it changes who they are in a way that's quite interesting. But mostly it's just kind of a comedy. Like it's really just kind of about two people navigating living with each other when they have very clashing values.
Yeah.
And they have quite a few interesting arguments about things that the other person does that they don't agree with. Like there's this whole argument that they have about like salmon. It's so funny.
Living with a
Yeah.
person who you clash with.
Yeah.
Well,
Wouldn't know anything about that.
cheers to that.
Kind of the idea of instant connection and how that can often lead to the deterioration of friendship. And
Yeah.
sometimes instant connection doesn't necessarily mean it's like healthy.
Yeah.
Sometimes instant connection can just be disguised jealousy, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Four Adventures of Renette and Mirabelle. Definitely funny,
It's got a
but
crazy name.
yeah, I know.
Adventures of Renette and Mirabelle.
Yeah,
Cool.
long names.
Non. Ce conseil dédaignerait.
So the next one is one that I actually haven't seen, but it's called Percival. Have you seen this
I
one?
have seen this one.
Okay, you can
But I
tell
need
me.
a little refresher.
Okay.
Oh, this movie's crazy. I feel
Really?
like I can't give it proper justice
Oh, no.
because I haven't like actually rewatched it since I saw it first time like 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But look at the shots.
Oh, I've seen these stills. Yeah.
The movie commits to being like a fairy tale. It commits to being like a fable. And it explores all the things that we've been talking about, like gender, economic freedom, feminism, all of these things. But instead of doing it in a postmodern 1960s world, it does so in like the Middle Ages. So it feels like Panto a little bit in the sense of like how whimsical it is and how the characters work. So I guess if I were to describe it, it would be Don Quixote, but make it French and the twink.
Got it.
I honestly have to be real. I think the strongest suit of the film is the visuals. Just how like committed they are to making this theatrical vision come to life in cinema.
Interesting.
I feel like the characters suffer a little bit because they become archetypes rather than like nuanced people, which is obviously one of his strongest suits.
That's interesting. Interesting
but
when
yeah.
he's more strong on the visuals, that's when he lets go on that element. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I
Kind of
do
giving Beau is Afraid, sorry, from the stills.
actually let me give this movie a proper place. If I were to have friends over, film friends over, and we're gonna be smoking around a little bit, and we wanted to put something in the background, this is what I would put.
Oh, interesting. That's great. That's a very good thought. Movies that you would screen for friends if you were going to smoke.
Yeah. I have a very long list of films like that.
I've not given this nearly enough thought. One of mine would definitely be Under the Silver Lake, though.
Under the Silver Lake is a fantastic one, but especially towards the end when you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
We should make like an entirely different video.
We should do a proper...
But I actually feel like Babylon
Yes.
would be a great
That would be
film
great.
for this, yeah.
We should do a video where we smoke and then watch all those films.
I think that's a good idea.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Summer 2025.
Or maybe we just like smoke and then watch clips of the film and then we talk about it.
Yeah, how it makes us feel.
Yeah.
I think we would
Cool.
really enjoy that.
Let's get zooted.
So next film in the series is Pauline at the Beach.
I feel like, do you want to take the lead on this
I
one?
will start off because this movie holds a very special place in my heart because it was actually my first Rohmer film.
I think it was not my first Rohmer film, but it was the first one that I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, so Pauline
I want to be the blonde lady.
Yeah.
That's who I want to be.
Yeah, just
That's
so,
who I want to be.
yeah, so messy and so hot and so like adult and just everything.
Yeah.
So Pauline at the Beach is basically about a young girl that goes on holiday with her cousin, Pauline, and they go to the beach. And on the beach, Pauline is kind of in this like messy kind of love affair with this like older man. And oh, maybe is the young girl called Pauline?
I think so.
She's called Pauline. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the younger girl, Pauline, she also has a crush on this like teenage boy, but she's also kind of just observing these like adult relationships and coming to terms with like how messy they are. To me, the movie is about her realizing what the currency of love is for women.
Yeah.
And kind of realizing for the first time that sometimes women won't be taken seriously and they will just be seen for their bodies, and kind of like that is the currency of love. And like her cousin is very much painted as like the pinnacle of like the beauty standard. Like she's gorgeous, she's blonde, she's skinny, she's just kind of like peak beauty standard exhibit A. Yeah. And it's kind of like her realizing like, oh shit, even my cousin that's so beautiful and so amazing, even she is being played by guys and has to kind of like use certain methods to like maintain
To
her
get her
attention,
way,
and
yeah.
she can't really do it without, and she's kind of like, oh shit, this is what women have to do. And it's kind of her realizing that.
Yeah. I think the movie is very much about girlhood versus womanhood.
Yeah, which
and
is really
as
nice.
Pauline transitions from one into the other, she finds out who does she want to become.
Yeah.
What type of woman does she want to be? Also, all the other characters that she interacts with. You have the cousin, but then you have all the other boys, and then you have the teenage boy, and she gets to decide what role each of them plays.
Yeah.
I love this film.
It's funny, just cousin, boy, teenage boy.
Yeah.
You're either one or nothing. Also, I wrote how the movie is kind of about how men view women and the ways that they think that women have freedom, but like that freedom doesn't really exist, you know. But they kind of think like, oh, you're a beautiful woman, like any guy would like want to sleep with you, like because of that you hold like power. But it's kind of about how like ultimately that doesn't make you really hold any power. You're still kind of victim to the same things and the same bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, kind of girlhood and her introduction to objectification, I guess. But still very lighthearted, considering the whole thing. Again,
Well, because it shows you the perspective of a teenage.
Right.
This teenage girl who, like, yeah, she's got questions, but she also wants to have a nice time.
Yeah.
She wants to have fun on her
don't we
summer.
all? Yeah. She's got questions. She just wants to have a nice time.
Is that so bad?
Is that too much to ask? Yeah, I think it's because it's from that innocent perspective that it makes it so much lighter. But there is also a taboo kind of older man, younger girl kind of sexual moment where Pauline is lying in bed and he starts trying to caress her knee or trying to touch her leg.
Just touching her leg.
And then she like kicks him in the face, and then he like doesn't really react. He just kind of like walks away. He's like, oh, okay. But she like fully kicks him in the face.
Yeah, which is a good.
Which is really
that's
nice.
a
It's like
one.
good for you, Pauline. But he does not react. Honestly, I think it's kind of saying that perversion in some way, or like it's like a test of like how far men can push their desire to be like, oh, how much can I get away with? And it's almost like you get more gratification from it if it's like harder to obtain. And if something is harder to obtain, sometimes that leans into the perverse. So it's like,
Yeah.
that makes it more gratifying because it's like kind of difficult to get
Yeah.
or kind of, you know,
I feel like you can
dangerous.
see Rohmer deconstruct woman piece by piece, film by film, but you can only see his deconstruction of men in the broader picture, you know? Because I feel like what you just described is kind of like the stepping stones towards the breaking point, which is when men start to have contempt for women. So I think like everything that you just described is like a precursor to the way men act in Suzanne's career or in My Night at Maud's. I will say, if you haven't seen any of these films and you like Call Me By Your Name, you owe it to yourself to watch Claire's Knee
and
Pauline at the Beach.
Yeah.
Call
They
Me By Your
would not
Name.
exist without that.
No.
100%. It's
And also they're the same vibe, so if you like the movie, you're gonna like those too.
Yeah, you want a sick fuck, but you'll like it. Now we're on to the last of the Comedies and Proverbs, which is Full Moon in Paris.
Oh.
Have you seen this one?
No, I have not.
Okay. I'm really excited about this movie. Plot synopsis first. It's about this woman and she's living with her boyfriend and they live in this house in the suburbs. Sorry, I just noticed there's a bug on the wall. Can you flick it?
Yeah.
Hey. It's about this woman that lives with her boyfriend in the suburbs and it's essentially an abusive relationship. It opens up with a really horrible scene of him just being really, really nasty to her. And I think he kind of like threatens the idea of like physical abuse, or he's really nasty.
Oh my God.
And she basically owns an apartment in Paris as well. So she has a conversation with him where she's like, I really love you, but this relationship's getting to be a bit too controlling. So I feel like I need to split my time between living with you and living in the apartment. Right. And then she lives in the apartment, but then through her taking a bit more control and like autonomy and like power in the relationship, he eventually ends up cheating on her. And to me, the film is kind of about how, to some men, relationships are about wanting ownership and control over a person, and ultimately when he can't have her completely and control her and like have everything from her, he loses interest and he ends up going with someone else. And it's really sad from her perspective because she's like really happy when she's in a relationship and she's able to have a bit more power and equality, but as soon as she has that, that's what makes him lose interest in her. So to me, the movie is about, can women ever truly have equal relationships with men? Will they ever be fulfilling, and will you always have to sacrifice some aspect of your like independence to be with a man?
Yeah, man, it's harsh, it's rough.
It's heavy.
Comedies, huh?
Yeah. And it's kind of similar, I guess, to the ending of the Moral Tales, in that it ends with the why.
It sounds like in the series, Rohmer has like a lot of fun exploring all these different ideas, but then at the end he always like reins it back and kind of asks us to examine the reality of the situation and be like, how do we act, how do we treat the people around us, and what impact does that have?
So my question for you, okay, I'm going to start with a statement that I've made, and you can say, do you agree or disagree?
Cool.
My statement for you: Rohmer's personal judgment on the situation comes from how he ends each of his films. Agree or disagree?
What do you mean?
Because we talked about the idea of him being objective in like his personal feelings on the situation or whatever that happens in every film. But I kind of feel like we see a sense of his personal feelings on the matter through the way that he decides to end the film.
Oh, yes. I think the ending of Moral Tales asks us, like, why do we act this way? Why do we think this way? What roles do we give ourselves? And I think the ending of Comedies and Proverbs invites us to question our involvement in this. What have you done to put what have you done? What have you done to put yourself in the situation that you are in? So many of the stories are about societal pressure and the different ways that it affects us. And I think that's kind of like at the core of it. What are your expectations about love? What are your expectations about success? And how is that informing your lived reality?
So, now we're on to nearly the final one, I guess, which is The Tale of Four Seasons. Smash. So, do you want to acknowledge anything about our current, like...
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I just think we look like we're going to two entirely different collabs. And the first outfits we did so well, just like randomly.
We were both wearing white.
We coordinated very well.
Yeah.
And now we're like, party.
You look really put together and chic and sporty. And I look like a slob.
And I'm drinking something green.
Minus the green juice. I don't even want to acknowledge this. One of our friends recommended this drink to Doc. I'm not surprised that it tastes like trash.
Rip.
Yeah. Rip. Sorry, George. Should we get on to the Four Seasons?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about...
On to the Four Seasons. Vivaldi, I love you.
Yeah, let's talk about Vivaldi.
Actually, you probably could say some interesting things.
I probably
about
could.
Vivaldi.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
I probably could, she says. But y'all not ready.
Modesty check. So, shall we start with A Tale of Summer?
Sure.
Yeah. So do you want to do a plot recap of this, or shall I?
Go ahead.
Okay, I shall go ahead. A Tale of Summer is essentially about this guy called Gaspard, and he goes on holiday. And on holiday, he basically has the predicament of which girl he should choose to date. There's 3 girls. He has a crush on all of them, and he's for the whole holiday, he's just like, oh, which one should I go with? And ultimately, the film ends with him deciding not to go with any of them because he gets a call to say that there's like a speaker system that he can buy for really cheap if he leaves his holiday immediately. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go for the speaker. It's so funny.
That is the most Rohmer ending.
It's the most Rohmer ending.
Wow.
It's so funny. I remember being so gagged when I watched that for the first time because it was so unexpected. And then...
Sound system?
Yeah. And then he's like, the object. I'm gonna go with the object.
Interesting, though.
Which is really funny and very interesting. So, yeah, what are your immediate thoughts on A Summer's Tale?
Well, based off what we were talking about before with the moral tales and how it's the story of, like, returning.
Yeah.
That, like, cock block at the end.
Yeah.
I'm, like, totally in brand. I'm like, yeah, that's our boy.
Yeah.
But I think it's, I don't know, a little sinister. A little, when you think about it a little bit, a bit deeper. How he's not really looking for a person. He's looking to to fill a void.
Yeah.
He doesn't like anything about the girls. He just likes that they're there.
I don't know. In some ways, I see it as like a parallel to the Green Ray, but it's someone that doesn't know that they're lonely. And he's very much like, oh, I have this like void of like loneliness that I want to fill, but because he's a man, he doesn't have any awareness of the fact that this void is there.
Yeah.
So he's just like, oh, I know that traditionally we're told that we should kind of fill this like void with a relationship, but he doesn't have the kind of inward introspection to be able to think, oh, I'm actually lonely and I should maybe put more care into this decision of ultimately like picking a partner. But to him it's just like, oh, I just have to pick anyone. And also it's very much like an egotistical thing of him just being like,
sure,
he just wants someone that's going to boost his own ego as well. It's someone that's going to like make him feel
well, it feels good
the most manly.
Yeah.
And it is funny because the 3 girls are also very much defined by like beauty, brains, and what's the other one? Brawn?
Yeah.
So there's like one that's like who plays Pauline in Pauline at the Beach.
Oh,
she's
cool.
in it. And she's very much the one that like challenges him intellectually and they have like really interesting conversations. And he should have gone for her. Then there's one that's like definitely very beautiful and she's like the original girl that like he goes on holiday to meet up with, but then he's not sure whether she's going to turn up for the whole thing, so that's why he spends time dilly-dallying with the other girls.
The hinge date.
Oh, honestly, yeah. And then there's the one that's like, I guess the bronze, which does that mean body?
That means strength.
Oh, strength. She's very strong. She's got a nice body.
Well, I mean, it is
I'll say it.
It is that, like you are right in that, kind of trifecta.
So he's attracted to her because she has big boobs. But then out of all of them, what's better than all of those things? A good speaker system.
Good speaker system.
Everyone can... We're adult enough to admit that, aren't we? Yeah, he's just unwilling to do any work to create actual intimacy with any of these women, which I think is ultimately why he chooses to go with the speaker over the girls, because it's like, oh, damn, a speaker's just going to be there. They're not going to question him.
It's not going to challenge
They're not going to put him in his place, you know. They're not going to challenge him in any way. So it's like, oh, yeah.
It's like you're right, it's like the dark version of Green Ray.
Yeah.
It's like, what if at the end, he retreats more into his loneliness.
Yes. Yeah, exactly, yeah. Do you think that Rohmer is trying to make a point with this thing here, with this film, about how consumerism has become a bigger value to people instead of romantic love? Because ultimately an object has more worth to him than a girl. Or do you think it's just another relation to him being like, oh, women are also objects to him, the same as the speaker, so that's why they're all kind of put on this even keel? Like, what's your take on that?
I'm going to say somewhere in the middle. I'm going to say that the issue with this little dude is that he just seeks like immediate gratification. So like he'll see a girl and find something about her that might be appealing to him. And he's like, I want to get that. I want to have that. I want to own that. I want to experience that. I don't think the film is necessarily making a comment about capitalism, but I do think that that's literally like capitalist behavior. That's, you know, the thing that keeps capitalism going, this ideology of just consumption and going through things. So I think this little man is a product of his time. You know, he consumes people like objects.
In this film, he very much is the archetype of that kind of like indie kind of fuckboy, soft boy type character.
Yeah.
What kind of character could you see Gaspard being in the modern day equivalent?
Tattoos that look like little squiggles.
Okay.
Yeah, but like a lot of them.
Okay.
Over like from in his arm. Yeah.
He definitely live in East London. He definitely live in Hackney.
100% dude.
Yeah, and he definitely have like a Soho House membership. And then he'd go there and then he'd just like sit and order coffees and do nothing. And he'd just be there like to eye fuck other women and do no work.
Well, he's too busy contemplating the pleasure of being himself.
Yeah.
Which is up next?
A Tale of Winter.
Simple conversation engender complicated human interaction.
Oh, great, thanks.
John.
Complicated human interaction. Wow, what a concise summary. So A Tale of Winter, do you want to do a plot summary or shall I?
You go ahead, I'll do it next one.
So A Tale of Winter is fantastic. So it's basically, it starts off and you see this like summer romance between this woman and this guy. And it's really interesting because for Rohmer, it's a very quick montage. There's music that plays over the whole thing, and you even see a sex scene, which you do not see in any of his other films, and this is the one that he chooses to use it. Which is really interesting also that this is A Tale of Winter, and the only other movie that we come close to seeing sex is in My Night at Maud.
Yeah.
And they both take place during the winter.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
He says winter brings people inside.
Yeah. But yeah, so it starts off with this like montage of this romance. They're very in love. It's very cute. Cut to 5 years later, winter. And it's this woman basically feeling indecisive about these two objectively great men in her life. Because they're both great, but she still has this memory of this one romance that like never happened. And it's kind of definition of like the one that got away. And it's her being like, oh, I really like this guy and I really like this guy. But also there's this guy 5 years ago that was like the one, you know?
Yeah.
And we also find out that she had a child in those 5 years. And the child is the product of the love affair.
My gosh.
That she had 5 years ago.
The drama.
Yeah, major drama. I really, really loved this movie. It really, really had an impact on me. It's so hopeful. And I feel like that's not something we see super often in his work, because I would say all his films are slightly more cynical than they are positive.
Really? That's interesting. Maybe we should talk about that later. But
Yes.
That's interesting because I would argue the opposite.
Really?
Yeah.
I take them as being more cynical, but this one is so hopeful because, spoiler alert, the film ends with her eventually reuniting with this man, and she never thought that she'd see him again. The whole movie, all her friends and family are constantly saying, let it go, you're never going to meet this man again. What are the chances?
And they're ruthless, dude.
They're ruthless. And then in very typical Rohmer fashion, because people always meet each other and end up chatting on, you know, the bus, in the baker, the butcher, whatever. She's on the bus and she just looks up and he's there. And then they reunite. It's the most like joyous reunion. It's like him properly just reveling in the delusion of what it would be like to be reunited with like a situationship, or the idea of like the one that got away. And he's like, oh, instead of the one that got away, let's make a movie where someone actually gets together with the one that got away. And it's so delightful. Cool. And I actually cried of joy. But I was like, damn, that's really nice.
That's so nice. That's so cool. Yeah.
And what I also like is that even while this person has not been in her life, she's still experienced great love with other people. And it's not that it's like, oh, it's impossible for her to fall in love with anyone else. Like, she's lonely forever. It's like, she has two really great men in her life that offer her a lot of stability, a lot of care. They're really nice to her child. They're great father figures. You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, you've asked me, I want to hear your thoughts more, because you've asked me before about the concept of fate and how things might just be destined to happen a certain way. As all his movies are like a little fable, a little lesson, I think this one is kind of teaching, again, the morality of loyalty. Being faithful to that idea, to this person that she loved, but at the same time, not disrespecting or making less of everything else. You know, as you said, the other men, they're great. It's not like the world is trash.
Yeah.
The world is good, but your ideal, you know, is
just a tiny bit better.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the idea of her being faithful, because religion is also quite a big theme in this film, because she's reunited with this man after this long sequence where she goes to a church and she prays, and we don't know what she's praying for, but we assume that she's praying to be reunited with this man because she talks about it all the time. Just like maintaining hope. Yeah. And that's ultimately what brings them back together in this like seemingly chance encounter on a bus. You know, it's like that idea of like, she made fate happen. I guess it's like manifestation. She manifested it. Yeah, she really did. For her. Is this movie about delusion or hope? And I would like to say that it's about hope. But I guess it's similar in some sense to a good marriage. There are parallels to that in the fact that delusion and hope, there's a very fine line between the two of them. Well, some would say they're the same thing.
The way I kind of think about it is that hope is involuntary, but delusion, you kind of have to bring yourself there.
It's proactive.
Yeah. That's and
I guess with delusion there comes an element of like denial. Yeah. It's like hope, but actively ignoring something that's like glaringly like an obstacle kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Maman n'aimait pas, elle voulait faire couper les arbres. Pourquoi ris-tu?
Oh, I'm gonna stop drinking this. It's got like little clumps at the bottom.
Ew, gross. Keep that to yourself. So, A Tale of Springtime.
Yeah, Tale of Springtime. Tom de Canton. This is a lady who's got too many complicated relationships in her life. Basically, it makes it so that she can't go home because she hates it there. Ooh, okay. So she meets this girl at a party. And they end up liking each other. And the girl is like, bestie, stay over. So she does. And then the next day, friend reveals that her father, he sees her a little bit naked after a shower.
Oh,
my God, the scandal.
Wow. Okay.
And then friend starts to get in her head because dad has got a girlfriend. And friend doesn't like girlfriend. So she starts to get in her head, what if this new friend... protagonist
became my new mommy.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's okay.
So she starts to set up she makes it so that they go to a cabin, whatever, you know, summer house, and it's the four of them. Girlfriend hates it. She's like, I'm out of here. And she bawls. And eventually John, the protagonist, was gonna go, but she stays. But it's just like bad vibes. So then she goes back to her flat in Paris, or where she's looking for her boyfriend.
Yeah, I think that's nice.
I think it's we see again the theme of faith, of loyalty, of who this person is going for. It's very sinister the way she tries to get a new mommy.
Yeah.
You know?
It's also interesting, in this movie, the cast is all new people. They're all unknown.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I did not recognize a single person. Which I guess, like Gaspard in A Summer's Tale as well, he's new to the kind of Rohmer cinematic...
The Rohmer family.
To the RCU, if you will. Which is interesting. It seems like because the season's quadron... I was going to say trilogy, but it's not a trilogy. It's a quadrology or whatever. What's it called?
Let's call it quadron.
A
That's
quadron,
very
yeah.
cool.
The season quadrons.
Maybe there's a bit of that young energy kind of showing up a little. You saw
Definitely.
people were calling it, well, not calling it, but it was the gay vibes.
Especially the fact that there's a sex scene in A Winter's Tale and then you see someone
Oh,
naked in
yeah.
the shower in this movie. Something about it just feels a bit more modern and a bit more fresh. Like,
Yeah.
Rohmer was like, oh, I'm just want to put a little bit of sex in my movie. A little bit of
Why
nudity.
not?
Yeah.
Something for the kids.
Go on. So, A Tale of Autumn. It's essentially a very similar plot to A Tale of Springtime, which is interesting. So it's about like a younger and an older woman, and then the younger woman has been having an affair, I guess, with one of her older professors. And then at the beginning of the movie, this like older woman is basically like, oh, I really, really want to get married, but I just don't want to put in any work to get married. And
Yeah.
then her younger friend is like, oh, I know a guy that I should set you up with, and it is the older professor that she's been having an affair with. But she's thinking like, oh, if I set my friend up with my professor, then I'll stop loving him because I'll want him to be happy with someone that I deeply care about.
And he will be unreachable.
And he'll be unreachable. So she tries to set her older friend up with this professor. But meanwhile, at the same time, this older woman also has another friend who's like the same age as her. And her friend is like, oh, I really want to put an ad in a newspaper to find her a husband. So meanwhile, she's on like this side quest where she's like meeting this man, pretending to be her friend, to basically arrange them.
Yeah.
And then after a little while of meeting, she's like, by the way, I'm not actually my friend, but I've been vetting you this whole time and you should come to a wedding this weekend and I'll introduce you so you can meet in a natural context. Then it's kind of like a comedy of errors, like everything kind of goes wrong. There's a bunch of miscommunications. To me, it's kind of about, similar to A Good Marriage, it's kind of about like not letting things be. It's kind of about people interfering and not letting nature run its natural course.
Yeah.
She owns this vineyard and she tends to these grapes every day, and it's kind of like these grapes have been growing for years, but there's still a new harvest every year, and it's kind of like a metaphor of like, oh, let the fruits blossom in their own time and you'll be able to reap the reward.
I have a question for you.
Do I have a husband? No.
If you went on a date with this guy and at the end of it he was like, actually, I'm not the guy, but I've just been testing you.
Oh, yeah.
How would you respond?
I'd feel a little bit betrayed, but I also would be slightly flattered because I'd be like, me? I've been chosen?
Little old me?
Me? So I'd be like, oh, that's really shady, but I'd also be like, oh, I'm kind of curious to meet this friend if I've gotten this far in the process.
Yeah, I would be careful though.
Yeah. Catfish.
Well, that
Yeah.
one, but also people who vet before meeting other people, they might have a lot of money, they might be very influential.
I'm going to get mafia'd.
Yeah, if you're gonna get into a situation, girl, have an easy out.
What would you do?
I'd be like, who cares? I'm already in love with you, so
Oh, yeah.
fuck that guy.
I'll have you.
I'll have you. And he's like, I'm not even gay.
Okay, my question for you. Rohmer has an interesting critique on intimacy and our reluctance to share ourselves with other people. There's a clash between the characters wanting connection but reluctant to work for it.
Yeah.
This feels like an increasingly common perspective on intimacy and is more relevant today than it perhaps was then. If Rohmer was to make a movie about dating apps and modern love, what do you think he would say about it?
Damn.
So basically, do you think Rohmer would be on Hinge? And what do you think he would have to say about Hinge and Tinder and like these dating apps?
No, he would make a film about a character so anxious that they can't
They
use
could never
them,
go on.
that they can never go on, that they download it and then before messaging anybody, they delete it.
Yeah.
But I think that's because like a straight line between us and then is that, you know, no matter what time, love or loneliness don't make sense. Green Ray is a character emotionally confused about loneliness. And Summer's Tale is a character logically, rationally confused about loneliness. It doesn't make sense. But it's very strong, very powerful. I think he would be making the exact same films now.
Do you think Rohmer is ultimately saying that loneliness is the most natural / default human condition?
I guess so. Because desire is maybe the most universal feeling. For we all want things, and sometimes we don't get them.
In that way, I would say that cynical. generally
I
as a collective
see.
body of work. That's why I think
see.
it's more cynical than positive. And I think that's why I love A Winter's Tale so much, because to me that is the most overtly positive and optimistic from all of his films. I would say everything else is a slightly cynical ending. Even The Summer's Tale,
Even The Summer's
a
Tale.
light-hearted film, but it ends with him choosing an object over romantic fulfillment and intimacy.
And we lol about it, but damn.
It's dark. General question. Why do you think he chose the seasons as a backdrop to this quadrant?
Well,
What do you think, why do you think weather and the natural environment is so integrated into this particular body of work?
Well, I think he cares a lot about nature, this little guy. And you can see it in his work, especially the collabs with Nestor Almendros. It's all very like nature oriented. You get to see the sky, you get to see the horizon, pulling at the beach. I'm not surprised that once he did color, he never went back to black and white. It's entirely unsurprising.
Yeah.
Human cycles, our minds go a lot quicker, but nature takes its time, and nature is beautiful, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, you have to let it run its course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he definitely does have this like reverence just for the natural world.
Yeah.
You see it in his cinematography. And even I feel like all the sequences of characters just walking from place to place, it's his own like nod to the environment. And just he kind of shows how like if you're open to the world around you, you can be surprised by it and you can let it touch you, which I think is so nice. He's kind of being like, oh, if you're open to the world, it will give back to you.
Yeah,
which is really nice.
Sorry, to end this fucking little waffle.
Pull your pants up.
That's all. People struggle to get their life through, to live, but nature just goes on.
Because nature doesn't need us, but we need nature. And so
true.
that's like the kind of one constant, I guess, in all of this.
This is true.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So moving on to our final category of films. So our final category of films is just aptly titled Other. And it's just a collection of films that I thought were significant to include, but they're not part of any like particular trilogy or quadrant. So the films that we have in this category, I've obviously narrowed it down because we couldn't watch all, a million of his films. So these are just the ones that are like feature length. So we have Rendezvous in Paris, we have Triple Agent, The Tree, the Mayor and the Mediathèque, Le Cygne du Lion, The Romance of Astor and Saladon, and The Kreutzer Sonata. So I want to go quite quickly through these because I don't think there's too much to say. I think we've generally covered like the main ones in his body of work. So Rendezvous in Paris. We didn't like this.
We did not like this. Let's just be honest. We didn't make it the whole way through.
No, it was.
And I did not look for it later.
I did not want to finish it. I think also because we got the gist of it. It's like split into 3 sections, but like each story is the same. It's like the same plot of like someone cheats on someone and then they get caught basically at the end of the movie. It was fine, but it wasn't great.
Yeah, I wonder
if
it was
fairly late in his career as well. It's kind of random for him.
Yeah,
and the poster is awful.
The poster is so bad. No, unfortunately, that one's a bit of a dud.
Flop. So next we have The Tree, the Mayor and the Mediathèque, which I know you're very excited to
This
talk
is my
about.
favorite one. I know you want to do it quick, but let me just go in depth for
please.
this one a little bit.
Please do. I'm very interested to know why you like it so much.
Well, first, I'm in currently like my political era. I'm learning so much about Marxism, and I mean, not because of me, just because I want to know.
The voice notes I get about Marxism is the highlight of my week.
When I saw the blurb being that this guy was about a socialist, the film said, well, the synopsis said, this film is about a socialist campaigning to stop a public mediathèque from being built. I'm like, sign me up, let's go.
It's got you written all over it.
Anyway, the film isn't exactly what I thought. I thought it was going to be more like a comedy of errors, like literally people just like stumbling over their words and just like bumbling fools. Because also the Google described it as deeply satirical, which I think it is, but only if you really know the internal politics of France.
Very French. Most obviously French,
Yes.
I would say. And also, especially because it came so late on in his career. It's quite a curveball from him.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was so surprised. I literally watched it last night.
So to actually tell you what the movie is and not what the movie isn't,
Yeah.
the movie is basically kind of the saga of a mayor trying to build a media tech, and it's told through roughly 3 perspectives. That being the mayor himself, the socialist teacher who teaches school children, who wants to stop it, and then this writer who's like kind of having this like fling with the mayor.
And also kind of a child perspective.
Yes, put a pin on a child because we're gonna go back to that.
Come back to the child.
So basically, what you get is like a very basic alignment system where you have the teacher who doesn't want the media tech, the mayor who wants it and is trying his best to fulfill everyone's needs, including this guy's, and then there's in the middle the writer, who is the one who's like philosophizing about everything and the meaning of everything, but she's got no stakes in the race. She doesn't actually give a fuck about what was going to happen. So you get interesting kind of like conversations and debates about, you know, public property and sightlines, legacy, aesthetics. I don't know. It's just so fun. And then at the end, it all comes together in a wonderful scene between the mayor and a child.
My favorite scene from the whole film.
Yeah,
I really
dude.
loved it.
100%.
Great. It just also speaks to him and the respect that he has for all people, that he puts the same amount of care and thought into letting children articulate themselves. And I feel like it's very kind of Kiarostami vibes of being like, oh, I just love and truly appreciate the value that children bring to the world.
Yeah.
And not in a sense of like, oh, we can learn something from them, but just the fact that they are their own people that are intelligent in ways that adults cannot comprehend because we're so distanced from that version of ourselves.
Not even like the people of tomorrow. They're people now.
They're people now.
And it's wonderful that all these big thinkers are talking about what's going to happen, and at the end it's all made clear by a child.
And it ends with
wonderful.
the child's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does have its humour, but I don't think a lot of people would find it funny. I think you have to understand Rohmer very well to appreciate it, and also to have a bit of like insider knowledge of like French political landscape.
Yeah, and a little bit about socialism.
A little bit about socialism.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But once you got all that, you're good to go.
You're good, yeah. With this movie, do you agree or disagree that it is a mockumentary? Dun, dun,
You
dun.
guys. I guess in a way it's the precursor to a mockumentary. I don't think this one qualifies as it, because I think an essential part of a mockumentary is to mock a film.
And you don't think it's mocking?
Well, I don't think the format of the film is supposed to be a film. You know, like mockumentaries are like, this is a documentary about something fake. This one is still trying to pass as a film. Stylistically, it sticks too close to Rohmer's normal things for me to consider it
Really?
a mockumentary.
See, that's because when I watched it, my immediate thought was this is essentially a mockumentary, because you have it broken up with like genuine interviews or what seem like real interviews with the real villagers in this town, you know?
Yeah.
But then also it feels like it is very much mocking the kind of similarities between the far left and the far right. And it's also kind of like making a point of like, look at these people that are so like passionate about these causes, but they don't realize that they're being kind of like a bit silly because
a bit
silly because they're so entrenched in these ideas that they're a bit like disillusioned. They've lost sight of what they're actually believing in. They're just more attached to like the values of what they think they should believe in, because like one of them's more right. It's like, oh, I should believe this, but they've almost lost sight of like the intentions, which is why I love that scene with the child, because she's kind of pointing out their divisions and also how stupid it is. And he's like, oh, don't you want a swimming pool? And she's like, there's a pool 3 miles away, I can cycle on my bike.
There's already a pool.
And then he's like, oh, but wouldn't it be nice to have like a library? And then she's like, I'd rather have a park. You know? And he's like, but we live in the countryside. And she's like, yeah, but you're obsessed with making everything like the city. And what does the city have that we don't? It has parks. And she also makes a point of like the class divide as well, because she's like, well, it's fine for you because you've got a massive garden and you can go play in the fields.
Sure.
But she's like, I've got a tiny garden and you've put barbed wire around all these other fences and all these other fields that are owned by farmers. So she's like, there's actually no green spaces for us to play. And he's kind of like gagged with that
Yeah,
point. He's
dude.
like, oh shit.
Oh,
He's
even-
like, yeah, you've got a point. So it kind of just pokes fun at these adults that think they're really serious with
Yeah.
their really serious beliefs. And it's like, actually, they're fucking stupid. And this child is smarter than all of them. Because she's like, where the fuck are the play parts? Where can I play? Funny.
It also just it gives an air of like childishness
Yeah.
to it all. We've been going in for far
could
too
talk
long,
about it for ages.
but it is my favorite film, and if you want to try it, you'd make me very happy.
It's interesting, yeah.
It's interesting.
It's interesting. Have you seen The Romance of Aster and Celadon?
Yeah, and I don't remember that much.
Crazy that I would have been old enough to meet him if I'd known about his existence. Yeah. I was too busy being a stupid child instead of like pursuing my lifelong
I
fantasy
wasn't
of
a
meeting
smart
Éric Rohmer.
child like the one we just discussed, bro. I was a stupid child.
Yeah.
Cool. So
Yeah.
I have seen it. I don't remember that much of it. I saw a lot of these films like 6 years ago, so I don't remember a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just gonna say Percival is better.
Okay. But it's a similar vibe of like theatrical.
Historic, kind of
Okay.
like, hey, he's French.
Okay. Someone's got to do it, I guess. Okay, cool. I guess that's that.
That's that one.
The next question is about Triple Agent, which I haven't seen because I can't find it anywhere online.
Anyway, I won't say too much about this one because believe it or not, it is a thriller. Dude, it's a mystery that is so good. It's still a Rohmer in the Rohmer way. Don't expect like a high stakes, high drama.
It's going to be a philosophical spy thriller.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
gonna
its
be
vibe
about.
is.
It's gonna be people in rooms chatting to each other. But
who
it's
happen to be spies.
yeah. Once you kind of get into it, the way I think you ended up getting into the comedy of MediaTek, if you get into the suspense of Triple Agent, it's so good.
And also shows his own range as well, which is something that I really respect about his efforts to try all these different genres. Because when I look at people like Christopher Nolan or like Wes Anderson, it's like they've never taken a risk in their entire career because they figured out a formula that works for them and then they stuck to it for every single film that they've made. Part of me feels a bit sorry for them because it seems like they're trapped by their own like legacy and their idea of like how people perceive them as like creatives. But at the same time, I disrespect them because I'm like, you've never tried anything different. You never tried anything completely new. Whereas Rohmer was like, up until his last year of making movies, he was like, fuck it, I'm going to do a spy thriller. And then being like, oh, I'm going to do, I guess, a mockumentary about like socialism. And, you know, it's like, he never played it safe. He had trademarks within each thing that he tried, but he was never confined to one genre.
Yeah.
Which is really admirable. So next one, the Kreutzer Sonata. Have you seen this one?
I've not seen the Kreutzer
Okay,
Sonata.
good thing I've seen this one. It's very random, so it's super early for him. It's when he was still just making movies. I think it was his first long short before his first feature. So it came right before Le Signe du Lion. And it's like 40 minutes long and it's all black and white. Visually, it's not super interesting. But what is interesting about it is that it's mostly handheld and close up. Which is very different from, as you know, the rest of his styles.
Yeah.
Pretty much all his movies past Suzanne's career are all like wide, no close-ups. Very, very rare.
I guess he was figuring himself out, you know?
Yeah. And it's also very interesting because it doesn't feel like Rohmer at all. It feels like him being like, oh, what do filmmakers make movies about? And he's like, oh, I guess I'll do a murder. So that's what
It's a murder?
It's a murder, yeah. The movie starts off with this guy. Also, what's interesting as well, there's no dialogue in the film. It's all a voiceover of a man narrating why he killed someone. And there's music playing throughout the entire thing. And the length of the movie is the length of the sonata that the film is named after. I don't know, just tonally completely different. It really caught me off guard. I was like, this doesn't feel like Rohmer at all.
Well, just earlier, we were talking about how he fits into the French New Wave. And it sounds like this film was him intentionally trying to be like them.
Yeah, true. It's just impressive to see how he managed to refine his style.
Yeah.
Actually, in such a short space of time.
Yeah, that's true.
Within the space of a few years or whatever. And you can see the Hitchcock influences massively in this one, which is funny because you wouldn't think Hitchcock is a massive direct influence of Rohmer, but in his interviews, he mentions Hitchcock all the time.
Really?
Which is crazy because you do not see that in any of his other films.
You guys don't follow your masters. Do your own thing.
Exactly.
I think, though, this is why I like your movies so much, because I could never make them.
Oh, that's nice.
Because they remind me of Hitchcock.
But yeah, so
what
that's
if, sorry,
the quote,
what if someone told you that your film reminded them of Tarantino?
I'd kill them.
Yeah, bro.
I'd actually stab
I'm
them.
like, I'm out of here.
Everyone knows. I still get so many hate comments on that video that I did about Tarantino.
Get it? Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so many.
Well, in a way though, the hate comments are good because it means it's reaching people.
Yeah, it means
here.
that it's touching a nerve, and if it's touching a nerve, it's touching on truth. Apart from the ones where people told me to kill myself when I talked about the Me Too movement.
And your video was also really good, so.
Thank you. I'm glad that I didn't kill myself after. Okay, and the final one in this category, Le Signe du Lion. That's the tongue twister.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it.
I have seen it, but here's the thing. It's the first one
Yes.
I ever watched.
First Rohmer film you ever watched? Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to say that I don't remember this because I'm reading the plot and I'm like, what is this?
Familiarity?
A
Go on.
French American in Paris lives by sponging off his working friends and throws a party using borrowed money when his rich American aunt dies, believing firmly in his horoscope.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of giving like Good Marriage in Suzanne's Career.
Yes, it's
kind of
giving
vibes.
idealism, you know, with the
Yeah.
horoscope, sign of Leo. What sign are you?
Pisces. Yeah. No. Hey! But you're an Aquarius, and that's basically the same thing. So shut up, you little bitch.
So it is that idealism that we see again in Winter's Tale about, you know, clinging onto an idea more so than a person.
But he's more delusional.
He's more delusional, yeah, and he's just like roaming. Generally, the film, I just describe it as roaming.
Brilliant. So before we get on to our official rankings, which I'm very excited about, I have
gonna
some.
fight.
We're gonna fight. I've pre-warned Doc that I'm in a fighting mood. I've got some quotes from Rohmer that I just want to discuss. So statements that he's made, and you're just gonna tell me your.
Let me
immediate
sit up for the
thoughts.
man.
Yeah, sit up. Show some respect. So, a quote from Rohmer about the moral tales. The moral tales doesn't mean there's a moral contained in them, even though there might be one, and all the characters in these films act according to certain moral ideas that are fairly clearly worked out. But they try to justify everything in their behaviour that fits the word moral in its narrowest sense. But moral can also mean that they are people who like to bring their motives, the reasons for their actions into the open. They try to analyse. They are not people who act without thinking about what they are doing.
Oh my
What
gosh.
matters is that they think about their behaviour.
Overthinkers, dude.
Yes.
The lot of them.
Yeah. Which, I just like that as a quote. I like hearing him
Movies about
articulate.
philosophers.
Yeah.
Movies about thinkers.
About philosophers, yeah.
But it's also
thinkers.
interesting because it doesn't narrow the sense of a philosopher or a thinker down. In his films, you get young university guys, you get dudes in their 30s, you get old guys, you get women, you get girls, you get children, you get everyone philosophizing and thinking about life.
But I guess we haven't touched on this yet, but the idea that his world is very narrow, even in terms of like age, it's broad, and in gender, but I don't think there's a single non-white person in any of his films.
And also class-wise,
They're all
it's-
very privileged.
Yeah. Well, I think something that Rohmer does, maybe without knowing, is that he's like obsessed with maintaining the status quo. So many of the films are about upholding the status quo. A character makes a transgression. They maybe cheat or they, do something that's not entirely morally right. And at the end, they go back and they find that the solution was actually sticking to the norm. The solution was monogamy. It's not perfect. And another one, as much as I love it, you can see it very well in the Mediatek one, because all these characters make a faff and everyone gets their 2 cents in. And at the end of the film, nothing happens. So I think there is a bit of a general lack of like progression or like progressive values, which again, I guess not everyone is like required to have, sure. But it does restrict, as you said, the narratives and the core of the stories that he's telling.
Yeah, 100%. How do you think he would respond to like criticisms about the lack of diversity in his films if he were alive now, because especially like in Paris, it's such a diverse, like, multicultural city, so it seems very intentional that he's only ever aligning himself with white characters and white centric stories, even when he's talking about universal feelings and quandaries, you know, such as love. Do you think that was conscious from his behalf, or do you think it was just like the kind of like ignorance that was more normalized at that time of like not having characters?
I think it's a little between ignorance and doing it consciously. I'm going to say conscious ignorance because
that's a good phrase.
Yeah. But Rohmer we're all racist. All of us, we're racist. I feel like Rohmer's racism was manifest in a way like, well, I only want to tell the stories of people that I know what their life is like.
That he relates to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think I'd like to think that he'd be more conscious of it now. But I like your phrase, like, intentional ignorance or conscious ignorance. Yeah. Because I think it is, for someone that was so concerned with the kind of clash between the old and new, you're right. He never really makes any step towards like a new equilibrium or like new something that's progressive, you know. It's always like people debating the idea of progression and then ultimately ending back up at the beginning. But yeah, I don't know, it is so glaringly obvious, but I don't know whether it is, I guess it is just also part of that like culture of filmmaking and cinema at the time where it was just like very white centric. I guess it is like a generational thing, not that that's an excuse, but it was more normalized.
I mean, the French New Wave was very white.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, as much as we praise him, it's important to recognize his shortcomings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My next couple of quotes that I think are really interesting. He said, "What interests me is to show young people as they really are just now, but also as they might be if they were 50 or 100 years old and the events of the film could have taken place in ancient Greece, for things haven't changed all that much. For me, what is interesting in mankind is what is permanent and eternal and doesn't change, rather than what changes." And this was his response when asked why he focuses on young people instead of older people in his films. Just the idea of like, time, he wants to make something timeless. And I guess that's kind of the clash in what we were just talking about, because they are timeless in the sense of like the subject matter, but they have aged badly in terms of the context of, just like the cast and the characters and like the idea of privilege and like race and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
He didn't know a world without Twitter. What a blessed existence.
I know. Yeah. Do you think he would have used like Facebook Marketplace?
No. Yes, he would use Facebook Marketplace, but he would not touch Twitter, dude.
No. What about Instagram? Do you think he'd post a selfie on the grid?
No, I think he'd be a lurker. If he were
He'd
on
have
Instagram.
a fake account.
Yeah.
He'd have a troll account.
As well for Facebook. He would use it mostly for Marketplace, but it wouldn't be him.
Can you imagine the idea of him saying like, just the reels, they're like, "I think I like this little life." People are like, oh my god. My last quote from him: "They are not what one is expecting to happen. They are to some extent against the person concerned. What happens is against the wishes of the character. It's a kind of disillusionment, a conflict. Not exactly a failure on their behalf, but a disillusionment. The character has made a mistake. He realized he created an illusion for himself. He had created a world for himself with himself at the center. They have a system and principles, and they build up a world that can be explained by this system. And then the conclusion of the film demolishes their system and their illusions collapse. It's not exactly happy, but that's not what the films are all about."
Damn.
Yeah,
I see that though. I see that, especially with Summer Tale.
Yeah, right.
I'm like,
so general...
balls my tuck.
Oh my god. So personal questions. Which of his characters do you identify the most with?
I'm much smarter than all of them, so...
That goes without saying. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna say the writer from the Mediatek. She philosophizes a lot about life, and she tells people her opinion about very deep things. And her opinion is well structured, but she ultimately has no stake in the race because she is not in the lead. And I see that a little bit in me. I engage with politics as if I were studying it as an alien.
That's
what about you?
It's funny, I haven't given this any thought. But I also do really like and relate to, obviously, the main character in Green Ray.
Yeah.
just being stressed about like the pressures of life
Yeah.
and the timeline that we're supposed to achieve certain things.
You're also green.
I'm also
There
green.
is also that.
Yeah, that's also true. I actually have green eyes.
Oh my god, yeah. Jesus. This is... I can verify, fellas, never do that again to anybody. The record is...
Jump scare. I reveal.
I actually want to change my answer. There is this...
Oh, I
guy...
want to change mine. Sorry, I just thought of something. But you go first. You go first.
There's this guy from Paulina the Beach who teaches the cousin to windsurf. And he's shirtless and he's got abs and muscles. That's me, baby.
Exhibit A.
That's who I am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. If I was going to change my answer as well, I would also say the child from Mediatek.
Yeah.
Just because she's annoying and curious and she likes to like piss people off.
And she
that's
reads
down to
everyone.
a T.
She's like, no.
Yeah. I don't know. I love like movies about children. And,
Well,
like,
I mean, you made a
makes
movie
sense.
about
I
children.
made a movie about a child, and I have many more movies about children that I want to make. So,
Cool.
And my next question for you: what do you imagine is Rohmer's most personal film? Do you think there's anything from his collection that you've sensed like more vulnerability from him, or that he would say is his most personal?
I can point out when he's not being, or when I don't think
Authentic.
he's being as genuine.
Yeah.
But he's always like putting his heart there, you know, in one way or another.
See, I would disagree.
Yeah.
I think, and maybe this is why I resonate with this film so much, A Winter's Tale is maybe his most personal. Just because, for many reasons, but I'll go into two. One, I've said that I think generally all his films are very cynical. And because this is the most optimistic, I get a feeling that maybe there's something personal that he's invested into it of like,
Yeah.
oh, I had a situation like this, I had a one that got away and I really would have loved for that to work out. So he's made a film where he's like, I'm going to go against all my previous endings of other movies where it ends with this crashing of, you know, values coming down and disillusionment being exposed. And he's made this movie where he's like, imagine everything goes right. And it makes me feel like he had a similar situation. And the second reason is because of the religious thing as well. Rohmer was like a devout Catholic.
Yeah.
And the movie has like extensive scenes of her like praying and going to church. He constantly revisits the church. And to me, it just stands out as being so different to his whole other body of work that I feel like there is some kind of personal situation or real life thing that he's drawn on to make that be so different. So
I see
don't know.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
will
my
say,
personal.
from our like choices and stuff, I would definitely say the ones where it's a female protagonist is where he's being more himself. The male protagonists are all kind of tools, and the film shows them as such. I think he thought women were cool.
Definitely. I think he definitely identified with the female characters more than the men. And I think that's him being vulnerable because it's him admitting that he doesn't fully relate to his gender or that he's kind of figuring out masculinity and his ties to it, which feels very vulnerable.
His own masculinity.
Yeah, so those are all my personal questions. So me and Doc are going to go have a quick break, and then we will come back and we will officially rank the entire thing.
Let's go! Mediatek sweep.
You wish. We are finally at the end of this godforsaken video.
Here we go. This is what we came for.
Right, the quest, the mammoth, the beast. The result is now upon us because what we are going to do is we're going to get our official, drumroll please, ranking board.
I've always wanted to be one of those sexy ladies that like carry around a sign in a game show. So
You are one of those sexy ladies. What do we think? What's the worst Éric Rohmer film?
Oh my gosh,
on
I
this
think
board?
it's pretty clear. This one comes pretty close, but I think Rendezvous in Paris. You already knew,
You read
dude.
my mind.
She already knew.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Yeah.
But I think a close second would probably be...
Is it them?
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, the girls
It's the
can go
girls.
there.
It's the dolls.
Yeah, the dolls.
You know, the experimental phase ranks near the bottom, but that's fine, dude.
That's okay.
That's
Everyone
what
goes
it's.
through that phase. If you were making a board of your life moments, what would be on the bottom row?
Damn. So what's next? Wait, what?
No, if you were to make a board of your life moments, what would be on the bottom row?
Dude, I thought you said this would be like this video
Oh, no.
would be here, and I was like, agreed.
No, I was fully asking you a
Oh,
question.
Awesome. I do have an answer for you though.
Oh yeah.
What would be down here for me? The gaming philosophy videos that I'm still making.
Oh.
Those will be
Bottom tier?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Actually, you know what?
What about you?
Bottom tier when I wore a vintage bowler hat in high school for fun. Bakery Girl Monceau. Surely that's
yeah, sure. It's very charming, you know? It's a very sweet film.
Yeah. But nothing super memorable. I haven't seen it. So I'm assuming that this is from you.
You put words in my mouth.
I'm speaking on your behalf.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have the top 2 tiers.
And then we're
Objectively,
gonna put... No. That has to be higher. Listen, I won't allow this. I will... Triple Agent can go. We chose to do this in the most inconvenient way.
I know.
Unclear way.
There's going to be studies done about the way we conducted ourselves in this video.
This is a pitch, right? How about Claire's Knee?
I was going to say.
It's really good.
Yeah.
But it's also creepy. So.
It's creepy, yeah. And also, I think I only gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd.
Damn.
I think it belongs there because of how iconic it is. And the controversy around it brings notoriety.
This is true. Now commences my battle to campaign and lobby for media tax supremacy.
Oh god. So this is what we have left. Should we move this? This is the current state of the board, so you can see. Honestly, I would say Tale of Winter.
Really?
Yeah.
I really respect you putting it here.
Yeah. I think for everything that I said about its hope and optimism, I think that's revolutionary for Rohmer. And I think that's just like, yeah, I love it.
Something that I think three films that I think we both really agree on are, Greenway,
100%.
Pauline, and the girls.
Okay, so if we're going to be respectable about this, then this is how I think it should go.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Then here.
Fine.
Then
I see your point.
Top 3 here. We can debate over this order.
Awesome. Yeah, that was good
I think that was really
diplomacy,
nice
although I think this should be swapped, but you know, I'm being silenced on set, not clickbait. As much as I love Boyfriends and Girlfriends, I believe she's number 3. She has won the bronze.
I think so.
The set design, beautiful. The acting, immaculate. The script, very funny, very naturalistic, very high feelings. It is drama, you know? It gets to your heart. Now, we've got...
Oh my god, people are going to flip about this.
You guys, it's a good thing.
You realise we'll never recover.
It's a good thing, you guys. My Mods is a good thing.
That's her place, okay?
We have a dichotomy here.
Yeah.
We're going with the grown-ups. The grown-up taste of Rohmer. His stories about adults. Or going with his stories about youth. Which one is peak Rohmer?
So this one is actually quite left field for him. So I wouldn't say it's highly emblematic of his work as a whole.
I see.
So I think
was a bit of an experiment.
Yeah. So because of that, I'm going to pitch for this to be number 2. Because I think for both of us, this one is more impactful.
True.
So...
And then there's Einstein up here.
Yeah. That's actually Christopher Nolan. Okay, so this is the official ranking. Shall we talk everyone through the entire order?
Sure, let's go kind of
bottom.
Level by level.
So we have Rendezvous in Paris first.
Yeah.
Four Adventures of Renette and Mirabelle. Then we have The Romance of Astria and Celadon. Rip.
Yeah.
I just realised I forgot to print Percival, but he would be
Percival?
Yeah.
No, he didn't make it, bro.
He didn't make it.
Sorry.
Then we have Le Cygne du Lion.
Well, Kreutzer Sonata.
Kreutzer Sonata.
Which is good because the 2 experimental ones here, you know? These ones are like a bit more out there somehow. This is 3 shorter stories.
Yeah.
These 2 are a little more like different, both in presentation and story. And then we get to the like experimental bits.
To me, because
so
also this one's
them.
just so forgettable. It's so similar to other films that he's done that doesn't really stand out. This one, experimental, first, rubbish. Pretty good.
Tale of Springtime.
Aviator's Wife. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so This Way, Up This Way.
Then we've got
Have a Good Marriage. Really funny times.
Sinister, though.
Sinister, but funny.
Then Triple Agent. For me, it should go higher, but I respect that there's other films, which maybe are a better showcase.
Love in the Afternoon.
Claire's
Knee.
Infamous Claire.
Famous.
She got her place, yeah.
Yes.
Because it's not necessarily a film that you want to condemn.
Right.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. It's a film, but no, it's great, but I wouldn't want to watch it again.
Exactly.
It was greatly handled, really well written, and dealt with. But
enough is enough.
It is inherently icky.
Then we've got The Full Moon in Paris. Then we've got Summer's Tale. I feel like this one is quite influential.
This is a really, really powerful. It's got everything. It's got romance, it's got wit, it's got comedy, it's got stereos, it's got sunglasses.
It's got pretty girls.
It's got fuckboys, it's got pretty girls.
Then Tale of Winter.
Tale of Winter.
Heart.
That was just like, I'm so excited to watch this movie again. I love the delusion, I love the hope, I love the one that got away. It's like crack for people like me that will always be pining over someone that wants them dead.
I'm gonna say that there's a tie actually here.
Yeah.
For fourth place between The Tree, The Mayor, and The Mediatek, and La Collectioneuse.
Yeah.
I love this one because it's quite unique. It's different. It's funny. It feels like a comic, dude. Like a French comic where they're funny and they're goofy and they're silly about politics.
Yeah, a mockumentary comic.
Yeah. And then
La Collectioneuse. It goes without saying. I just think it's so funny. I love the satire. I love the critique of the male ego. I love how hot it is, how summery. The location is beautiful. I genuinely think this is his most visually beautiful.
I think his most visually
I
beautiful.
really hope you agree with me on that.
No.
3.
Boyfriends and Girlfriends wins the gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bronze.
Very. I don't know about sports. It's very accessible for like people who are starting to get to know Rohmer.
The noobs.
It's very also clear, transparent, very visually stimulating. Then
The Green Ray.
do you want to talk about Green Ray?
Yeah, I just think it's so important in his body of work. It's so well known, and I think it really is so different as like a standalone piece. Like it just doesn't really compare to many of the other ones in terms of themes.
Yeah.
Like I said before, it's about loneliness in a very explicit way, whereas I feel like all the other films are kind of touching upon the idea that loneliness is like the natural default human condition.
Sure.
But this is the only one where the character is like actually dealing with this in a real way, because all the other characters have relationships and they hide their loneliness behind people that they don't really connect with. And it's just nice to see someone being so open about how they feel. And it's just a very like haunting film.
Yeah.
This one really stays with you in a very real way.
And
So,
then we've
yeah.
got Pauline at the Beach.
Do you want to talk about
She actually does win the gold.
Yeah.
I think that one is the most visually beautiful.
Really?
I'm just quite drawn to all the nature
Yeah.
and also the indoor shots, how people are just lounging around talking. You see yourself reflected in a, lighthearted way. It's fun, it's goofy, it's silly, it's also meaningful.
Yeah.
It's about growing up, but it's also about being grown up. It's Rohmer at his best. I believe this is Rohmer like in his prime in his career, once he was just like fully, just like, I
had it
know
down.
that one.
Yeah.
And this might be one of the first like, absolute just like flashes of brilliance.
Yeah, it was just so formative. It was just like, it was my first Rohmer film and it had such an impact. But yeah, it just speaks volumes to him as a director that it then sparked this love for his entire body of work. That was all down to this film. So I think that kind of says it all, to be honest. So that's been the Éric Rohmer video.
Cool.
Thank you to Doc for coming along. I'm going to put a link to your channel below because Doc is one of my favourite YouTubers.
Oh, lol.
And one of my favourite people, but definitely one of my favourite YouTubers.
I had a lot of fun. And thank you for indulging me with my silly little Mediatek film.
I'm going to rip
just
it off
fun.
as soon as you leave, so it's fine.
You can find me on YouTube as well.
I will link it down below.
I have 2 channels. Axiom is one of them where we talk about philosophy and video games. Figuring it out, it's more like documentary style. And then we've got Axiom Cast, where it's just silly and fun and stupid. I'm also a wrestler. I'm a gamer. Yeah, I don't know.
Bit of a maverick
a bit
overall.
a bit of a bit of a winner. Sorry.
Yeah.
So on that other second channel, Axiom Cast, today there should be a video coming up with Emily there as well.
Yes.
Very different video.
Very
I had her
different.
over and we played The Sims and I gave her a design challenge. I put her through her paces.
Yes.
Poor thing. But she did very well.
Yeah,
so
we
you can go
tried.
watch that now if you like.
You should. I think it's going to be funny. I can't wait. But yeah, so that's everything. Thank you for watching this silly, silly video. That's Éric Rohmer.
Thank you for watching.
Go watch. Bye-bye.
MediaTek should have been number one. MediaTek snub.
Fuck you.
MediaTek snub.